Madam Chair, is now streaming.
Now we are.
We're not. Hold on.
We are, we're not. We will be.
You are now live. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
Thank you,
very
Rosie.
much. And welcome everyone to this meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board. Today we are March the 26th, 2024. And I am calling this meeting to order. Melissa, may we have a roll call, please?
Chair Rios,
Here.
Vice Chair Guida,
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano, Member Beachide.
Here.
Member Bienvenu.
Here.
Member Mather.
She will be in later,
Okay, Member Valdo.
excused.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. The first change or the first item to note is under old business. There's some new information that was provided in the packet regarding the design of the yard wall. So I just would like to make note of that. The item 8A 2024-007940 HDRB 1030 and a half Houghton Street will need to be postponed. An appeal has been filed on the Board of Adjustment decision, and that stays all proceedings. And also on item 8C and 8D, the packet was updated. I sent you all an email with the building officials report that the wrong item was put in there.
Okay,
And
thank
that,
you. Is that
that's
it?
all the changes.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as just amended?
Rita so moves.
Aguilar Medrano seconds.
A roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachide.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have no minutes this time. And we also have no findings of fact or conclusions of law.
There are minutes, aren't there? Amanda?
Minutes? Nope. Not any
March.
that are listed on the agenda. Oh, excuse me. On my agenda, the one that I printed didn't have any, but apologies. I'll go by this other one. There are minutes of March the 12th. Changes to these minutes. Board members, staff, anyone?
No, Chair Rios.
If not, is there a motion to approve these minutes?
Aguilar Medrano approves to move the minutes. Each side seconds.
And roll call vote, please.
Member Beachide.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Abstain?
Member Aguilar Medrano. The motion has been, did you say yes? Yeah, thank you. The motion has been approved.
Thank you. For findings of fact, conclusions of law, let me see. Hold on. We have two, and one of them doesn't have a date, but I'm going to guess that they're both from February the 13th.
Madam Chair,
Changes- Yes,
the findings of fact, conclusions of law for 123 and 135 Grant Avenue are from January 9th.
okay, thank you for clarifying that. So we have two, one from January the 9th and the other one's from February the 13th. Changes to the one from January the 9th, yes. Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for not getting these revisions to the city attorney in time to be in the packet, but I will propose the following revisions to case 2023-7222 HDRB 123 and 135 Grant Avenue. In the conclusions of law, under paragraph 1A, delete the first clause, the term cantilever is not defined in the city code, and start that sentence at the board concludes that, strike a and replace it with the proposed, continue with doorway overhang, add an S to make that plural, overhangs, supported by walls on three sides, add R, delete is, not, delete a, cantilever, make cantilevers plural, and then add the words as proscribed by the ordinance before the semicolon. In subsection C, where it says does not find that a step back is required, change that to does not find that step backs plural are required. And where it says to a tall parapet, change that to the tall parapets, plural. And then add the words in this project as designed before the semicolon. In paragraph 3, add the words and conclusions after findings. Then when it continues specifically to the project, insert the words unique circumstances of the before the word project. Continue to open to the public, add the word and before devoted. Where it says to a specific artist, add the words internationally renowned artists with local importance and iconic aesthetic sensibilities as intended to be reflected in the design. In the next sentence, add the words or intend after the words does not wish, and then continue to set a precedent for all future proposals. In paragraph 7, subsection B, strike the words contrary to the recommendations of the staff, which was already stated earlier in the findings. And that's all I have for proposed revisions.
Benvenu, thank you for your thoroughness. Member Guida.
I also want to thank Member Benvenu for his thoroughness, and I would take the discussion of 1A under conclusions of law a little bit further. To me, it's not necessary to point out that cantilever is not defined in the code. Door, stucco, other terms that we generally agree upon are not defined in the code. I don't know that that's necessary on a case-by-case basis to review the meaning of cantilever.
I did propose that those words be
Yep.
stricken. Okay.
Any other changes on either one of these? If not, is there a motion to approve as amended?
I move to approve both findings and conclusions in the packet as submitted and with the proposed amendments.
And do I hear a second?
This is for both A and B.
Yes.
Guida will second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Abstain.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Anyone in this audience wishing to come forward and speak about anything in particular, not regarding the specific cases that we're going to hear this evening, but you may speak on anything else that is board related or preservation related.
Word, I'm here to talk about transparency because something I see is not happening, especially in our plaza area. Somebody went and put up a camera right on top of the middle of the bandstand, directly on top of the bandstand, which I think is a violation of what the plaza is all about. I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, surveillance is okay, but put it right in the middle where everybody does their dancing and everything. And I've asked around, and nobody has taken responsibility on who's put that camera up there. And if you go in the plaza, I would brought a picture, but I didn't think I had that thing. But it's really a huge camera, and it's right set in the middle there. And I can't understand why the public wasn't involved in any of the decision making. I always thought you guys would be involved in the decision making, what goes on in the plaza, especially on the bandstand itself. Because this is very, very important, just like the obelisk was. But now it's getting really destroyed by having the camera sitting right in the middle of it, where everyone dances. I'm just kind of disappointed to not knowing who did it and why wasn't the public involved, or why wasn't there any discussion with even with you guys on putting that camera. I don't know if you guys have had any discussion about it, but that's all I am. I'm just disappointed that I don't see any transparency in this administration as to what goes on in the plaza anymore. You know, the camera is really just it's not something that should be there, and especially in that spot, dead center on big large cameras at the plaza of the bandstand. So that's all I want to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rick. Did you want to come in? Heather, you're looking at me.
There we go. Yes, thank you. Historic staff and land use staff did not know that the camera was put up, so I will talk or follow up with you, Mr. Martinez, once I find out who put it up.
Mr. Herrera?
Yes, Madam Chair, my name is Raymond M. Herrera, 379 Oakland Avenue, Mexico. I missed your last meeting, comments on the floor by 5 minutes. So I'm here tonight. Just off again. Some of my constituents have contacted me the last couple of months on the guest house that is being built or is built on Plaza Chamizal, right facing Aceque Madre, right by the street. I think it's a slap in the face of Mrs. Stinson and myself, because I grew up across the street from that Plaza Chamizal. To have a frame house or a frame structure built in the oldest historic compound in Santa Fe. The most beautiful compound. And to have a frame structure constructed there, I think is really in bad taste. And I don't know who's responsible for it, but things are changing. The historic district is going to hell, and I can say that you guys are partially responsible for allowing such things to happen. And there's another house that's being built 2 houses up from there on the same compound. Being approved, I think. And I don't know yet if it's gonna be made out of frame or adobe or what. But something should be done. Someone made the comment that it's a financial crisis for the owners. Yes, you know, anyone that can afford to buy a place in Plaza Chamizal doesn't have a financial crisis. I would, but not people that are moving in there. So I think it's really sad. That's what's happening in the east side. Also, on the corner of Coronado and Galisteo Street. That's in the historic district, right? That big house that was recently built there. How in the world did that get passed? It's a monstrosity. And it doesn't fit into the neighborhood at all. I mean, it's right on the corner, it's pitched roof, which there aren't any pitched roofs in the area per se. And it just stands out like a sore thumb. And there again, someone is responsible for allowing. And what else? No, I think that's all for tonight. I thank you for listening.
Okay, Ray, thank you. I just want to comment in reference to what Ray just said. In reference to the Plaza Chamizal, that perhaps you think that people are required to use Adobe. I don't believe that is the case. And Heather, if I'm incorrect, you can correct me.
Chair Rios, I'm not sure. I was trying to look up the minutes to see whether Adobe was required. And typically the applicant volunteers it. It's just the appearance of Adobe is what's required by code. But I was double checking to see whether there was a commitment made by the applicant at that time.
Okay.
The approval was in 2022. And so I'll get back with you and let you know.
And also in reference to the house you were speaking about on Galisteo, it's right on the corner. This side of Galisteo is historic district. The side where that house was built is not. So
Madam Chair,
yes, Frank.
I did find the minutes for the Historic District Review Board meeting at which that house at 416 Acequia Madre was approved. And I do see that there was a discussion about the structure being Adobe, but the motion was to approve the project as submitted, noting that it may not be Adobe, but a framed construction. Member Guida made that motion. Member Beachhead seconded the motion. Member Bienvenu clarified that the applicant's intention is, even if not of Adobe material, the essence of the design presented in the application in terms of massing corners and battering will remain. That motion passed on a unanimous vote among 4 members, and that was April 25th, 2023, and that case number was 2023-6632. That's what my minutes.
Frank, thank you for giving us that information. Stephanie Beninato.
Yes, Stephanie, excuse me, Stephanie Beninato. I hope you can hear me now that I'm at the microphone. I agree that there's a lack of transparency. The camera on the plaza right there is pretty disturbing. There are cameras on other buildings around the plaza, which I think would give adequate coverage. Also on Sunday, I know there was a medical incident. But there was a recording on the plaza about "you are trespassing. This plaza is closed. Get off the plaza now." And it wasn't just, and you know, they taped off part of it. But people who weren't even walking close to that were triggering this recording. And I was doing a tour, and the people with me said that that had been going on even in the afternoon, which seems like really weird and very unfriendly. It is a public place, and unless there's some real big reason, like, you know, what happened where they blocked off some of it, I don't see why that recording is even happening, unless somebody put it up as a joke, but I don't think so. The other thing, if we're talking about structures in historic zones, I did point this out to Gary Mokino the other day, but there's a construction permit for a fence at Don Gaspar and Burger, I believe it is Burger. It is I don't know how old the fence is. I wouldn't say the fence is historic because it looks like something you could have gotten at a hardware store. It is a low fence. And again, it's not wired, historic wiring fence. But I wonder if it's going to stay that low, if it's going to stay that kind of material. I did ask Mr. Mokino. I do think it's in the historic district. However, if it's going to stay as short as it is, perhaps it doesn't come to the board. So anyway, I'm just kind of bringing it to your attention. And one more thing, I talked to you a long time ago about how excited I was because I found somebody to help restore the floors at La Posada. That did not work out. And all this time, La Posada has done nothing. They told me, oh, well, we'll have to hire somebody from Texas because the corporation's in Texas. But they don't even do that. They actually just put rugs down, and all these pieces of parquet flooring are coming out. And I've heard that they just throw them away. They're not even trying to preserve them. You were interested, very interested in the wall at St. John's. I know they're not here in front of you, but I was hoping that perhaps as board members, you could decide to write them some letters and urge them, because I understand the local manager is not at all interested in preserving the floors in there, but they really are amazing floors and they really should be preserved. They're close to 100, they're 140 years old. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in this audience wishing to come forward at this time to speak about any matters that are on your mind? Appears not. Anyone on Zoom, Heather?
Chair Rios, there are no hands raised.
Thank you. And Heather, what do we have under staff communications?
I have one item, Chair Rios, with reference to the zoning code update. It was decided by the consultant and land use staff that special attention be given to the historic districts ordinance. And so therefore, I'm going to be convening a meeting. I've gathered, a representation of different organizations so that they can be part of this technical advisory committee Carrios and Madam Member Aguilar Medrano will be part of that working group, as well as folks from the Old Santa Fe Association, the AIA, and Friends of Architecture as well. So I think we should be able to have some good, robust discussions. This first phase is really just about the reorganization of the code and what we call code hygiene, so that it makes sense. There are portions about demolition in section 3, and then there's our design standards in section 5.2. So we will be doing those types of things and potentially adding graphics, but there are going to be broader issues that we'll be discussing as we proceed through. So I've quizzed some folks on the time, and the tentative first date, which I'll be sending out invitations, is for April. I'm sorry, I just lost it. April 17th at 5:30 p.m. And I will send further correspondence with the committee so that they know.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Anything else?
That will be all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We will move on to old business. We have 2 cases under old business. I will limit public comment on any cases for 2 minutes. And also I need to tell you about the appeals process. If you wish to appeal a decision that this board renders this evening, you have the option to do that. You'd be doing it to the city council, and that would happen after the findings of fact and conclusions of law have been approved. You'll have 15 days after the findings and conclusions have been approved. With that being said, we'll move on to the first case, which is located at, both cases are located at 126 Camino Santiago, and these are Lanny's cases. Lanny, give us your report, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is case 2023-007678 HDRB for 126 Camino Santiago for a remodel. As part of the staff report and the packet, staff included information about Plaza Del Monte, which is the compound where these buildings are built are at. I'm not going to actually go over all of that information as part of this presentation. I'm going to concentrate only on the property. You have to pause for a second. It's not coming up on the board. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so the residence at 126 Camino Santiago was constructed as part of the Plaza Del Monte compound in 1966 and is listed as contributing to the downtown and east side historic district, with the north elevation listed as the primary facade. Previously, the property was a single property, and it was 4,673 square foot, fourplex family residence with a laundry room. It has now been divided into 2 individual residential structures as part of a subdivision that was created in 2022. The residence, now addressed as 126 Camino Santiago, consists of the structure's 2,085 square foot western end. The quad apartment block at 126 Camino Santiago was designed with room block massing at the center to act as a hood over the laundry, and raised triangular party walls divided the sections and bookend the building, and a viga portal is on the front facade. The layout is unique to the Plaza Del Monte development because the other apartment structures have room block massing at the ends of the structure. In February of 2024, under case 24-007794 HDRB, the applicant was approved to demolish the garage and carport structure to the south of the residence. Now the applicant proposes the following exterior alterations: a 1,237 square foot garage carport bunkhouse structure to replace the previously demolished structure on the south of the property, and a 211 square foot addition to the rear of the residence that will connect the residence to the garage structure. An exception to section 14-5.2 D2 for constructing greater than 50% of the original footprint is requested. They are going to construct a 6-foot high yard wall and vehicle gate on the south of the garages, running from the garage unit south to the lot line and then turning to run along the south property line. Replace corner windows and entrance door in kind with the existing openings on the north elevation. Infill windows and apartment and mechanical access doors on the north elevation. And an exception is requested to section 14-5.2 D5A to alter openings on a primary facade of a contributing building. And construct a yard wall varying in height from 4 feet to 5 feet with 6-foot high round pilasters on either side of the 5-foot pedestrian gates. The applicant presented the initial design of this application on February 13th of 2024. The HDRB requested a redesign of the additions and yard walls, noting that the yard walls should be lower or have fenestration so that the primary facade would not be blocked. The wall should not connect to the primary facade and should be less foreboding. They also stated that there should be a visual separation between the house and the garage, and that the overall south elevation of the garage needed to be more sympathetic to the contributing structure. The applicant has made design changes that follow the directions from the previous hearing. These changes include: on the west elevation, the applicant has designed the addition connecting to the residence to the garage unit so that it steps in toward the east to break up the singular mass of the building and make a clear distinction between the main residence and the garage unit. On the south elevation, the applicant has designed the garages with varying heights for each section to break up the parapet line, designed the garage with party walls to break up the singular parapet and mimic the party walls of the residence. And they've set the garage doors further back in the door opening to create a shadowing effect. For the yard walls, the applicant has lowered the yard walls from 6 feet to varying heights from 4 to 5 feet along the northern and western portion of the lot. They've removed the square pilasters to soften the flow of this wall and designed the pilasters at the gate to be rounded at 6 feet. They have also designed the yard wall with window openings with wood slats. The applicant did address the required exception criteria for section 14-5.2 D5A to alter openings on a primary facade of a contributing building, and section 14-5.2 D2D for constructing greater than 50% of the original footprint. Staff finds that all exception criteria have been met and recommends approval of the application as it complies with 14-5.2 D general design standards for all H districts and 14-5.2 E for downtown and east side design standards. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Lanny. Would you indicate to us which are the primary facades?
In this particular one, the north facade, which is the top drawing there. If you want to see it as it is, let's go back a little bit. It would be the top image here.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarification, Member Guida?
Madam Chair, just a request that we also hear 128 Camino Santiago, the staff report and the discussion. They're connected projects, and I assume it would be very
These
similar.
cases are very similar. I mean, they're in the same area. And I'm wondering, in order to save some time, and perhaps we can hear both of them. Would that be okay with you, Heather?
Yes, if that's the pleasure of the board.
And that we will make separate motions for each one. But let me ask board members if they have any further questions in reference to this one. Nothing right now. So Lanny, may we hear the next case?
Some of what I was going to say repeats, so I'm going to skip through that if that's okay with you. So this is case 2023-7680 HDRB for 128 Camino Santiago. It's going to be the portion of the residence, the 2,588 square feet of this fourplex on the eastern side of the building. So, and the rock wall at 128 Camino Santiago, in front of the building is actually a contributing wall that will be remaining as part of this project. So, the specifics of this particular one is a 1,391 square foot garage storage structure to replace the previously demolished structure on the south of the property. A 949 square foot addition to the rear of the residence that will connect the residence to the garage structure. And they've also requested an exception to section 14-5.2 D2 for the 50%, exceeding the 50% footprints. Construct a 200 square foot freestanding carport to the east and south of the garage structure. Install a 5-foot high yard wall to the east to connect the garage structure to the residence and create a courtyard. Construct a 5-foot yard wall along the eastern side of the garage to connect the western corner of the carport to the garage. And construct a 6-foot yard wall at the southern property line. On the east elevation, they want to install a window where one does not currently exist. And then construct a 427 square foot per tall in the courtyard. On the north elevation, they want to replace corner windows and entrance door in kind with the existing openings, infill windows, and apartment mechanical access doors, an exception to section 14-5.2 D5A to alter openings on a primary facade of the contributing building as requested, and construct a yard wall varying in height from 4 to 5 feet with 6-foot high round pilasters on either side of the 5-foot pedestrian gate and windows. So after the last hearing, they did make changes. Again, they designed the garages with varying heights to break up the parapet line, designed the garages with the party walls to break up the singular parapet and mimic the party walls of the residence, set the garage doors further back in the door openings to create a shadowing effect. And for the yard walls, lowered the yard walls from 6 feet to varying from 4 to 5 feet on the north and east of the residence. Removed the square pilasters to soften the flow and design the pilasters at the gate to be rounded at 6 feet. And then they also designed the yard wall with the windows. They did address their exception criteria as required, and staff also finds the exception criteria to have been met and recommends approval of the application, as it complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E for downtown and east side historic design standards.
Thank you, Lanny. Lanny, can you let us know why the applicant is wanting to infill? There appears to be a lot of doors, and perhaps they were using this as something different.
Yes, so this is going from a multifamily residential structure to single family. So right now there's like two different entrances on each one of the properties. So they're trying to close up some so that there's only one entrance. The mechanical doors are no longer necessary. They're going to be on the other side is going to be residential area rather than mechanical rooms. So they want to close those in.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members? It appears not. Yes, Mr. Padilla. Will you come forward and let us know what else you want to tell us?
Mr. Padilla did offer us some renderings, which I'm going to go ahead and put up here for you guys to see.
I'll go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
John Padilla, P O Box 22986, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87502. Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. We're back before you this evening with some modifications that we have made to the plan, and also taking those considerations in those modifications from our last meeting. One of the items that I wanted to share with you is the fact that a question about Chair Rios about multiple doors and so forth on the front elevation. It is clear that no longer being individual units, as we mentioned in the in our last meeting, is those were mechanical room doors. So each wing, 126 and 124, ends up with 4 doors on the front of the front facade of the house. So being that they're single units now being combined, excuse me, 2 units being combined into two single family residences, we wanted to define one entry door, hence the elimination of the original mechanical room doors and the second unit door. So the rendering, what we tried to do, and I think Member Benvenu had mentioned that, try to have a rendering or something to help you kind of see what we're proposing. We're providing for that to you this evening. The concern on the back was the fact that it was a long wall. We had multiple garages, one garage on each end, and then carports in between that were divided with party walls, et cetera. So what we wanted to do is to echo that same type of pattern or rhythm on the back elevation, so that you saw party walls separating the different portions of the residence. In the middle, where the gentleman is in the rendering, that is actually the separation between 126 and 128. There is an opening there that has a gate that allows the owner of 128 to be able to access the back of the house, refuse, et cetera. So that is their access there. The changes that we incorporated was, again, trying to define the rhythm that exists on the current building with the party walls and on the rear elevation there, or the south elevation. One of the things that we tried to do was to indicate that with the changing in heights of the walls, we went from 5 to 4. The only thing that is at 6 foot would be the topmost point of the battered flat radius pilasters that identify the gates or the entry points in on the plan. The front of the building remains pretty well intact. What we've got is what we're showing here on 126 are the windows that are remaining, that will be, as we mentioned in the last meeting, will be replaced in kind, so that, we still maintain the windows, same style, et cetera, for that. So that, in a nutshell, is the presentation with additional items. I'm more than happy to stand for questions and ready to.
Thank you, John. Board members, do you have questions of Mr. Padilla at this time? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, John.
Good evening.
Thank you for this. The renderings are really helpful for understanding the design, and I think I really appreciate the degree to which you took the recommendations and design guidance from the board, both in terms of the curvilinear nature of the proposed yard wall, lowering it, and then and really, choosing to step the wall up at an angle which does echo the form of this kind of mid-century interpretation of Santa Fe style of a Pueblo revival. And I really do appreciate those changes and many of the others that you've made in this, notably on when we look at the garages, the choice to differentiate parapet heights and to repeat the kind of rhythm that was part of the carport structure is appreciated. I guess my only question about this is, you know, I see, I mean, I know you're under the allowable height. It's not an argument about objective height of the building, but it is one about just kind of sensitivity to the original structure. I know that the carport that that we approved for demolition was maybe 8 or 9 feet tall. I mean, maybe some of the parapet walls stuck up higher than that. But particularly at the end where you have the roof deck, we're at 15 feet. And I'm just wondering if, you know, granted, you know, having a roof, the insulation and a parapet and a guard wall for a roof deck is, you know, is going to produce a higher mass. But I'm wondering if it needs to be high all across the board. It looks like the garages have 10-foot ceilings, 9-foot doors, which are, you know, tall for residential garage doors. I'm just wondering if that bar, at least in places, might come down a little bit and reduce in scale to be more sensitive to the building. It does peak up behind it at certain points when we're looking at it from the north. And I see this as a big departure from the mass that's there now. And I'm just wondering if that's a possibility that we could go to maybe 7-foot doors and lower ceilings in the garage.
Madam Chair, Member Guida, that is possible. The area where the bunkhouse is, the windows that we see there, that is the highest portion. That's where we would hit the 15 to the top rail required by code. There is a grade change of almost 24 inches from the front of the north side of the building. That's 13.3, I believe. There's a 2-foot change that we limit the maximum height that we can design to 15. Is there the possibility to bring that down or to have another rhythm or step in that south elevation portion of the bunkhouse? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We can consider that. I mean, if you want an exact dimension now, it would take me a bit to go through that calculation. But if it would be a condition of approval to make sure that that line, that south portion of the bunkhouse, as we'll refer to it, has a step in it and it not be a continuous maximum height. I'm more than happy to meet that condition. I
greatly appreciate that. I know the project benefits from some of the grade change, right? I think the interiors kind of step down as well. It's that kind of difference between the 10-foot ceilings that you've got throughout the bunkhouse and the garage structure and what I know is an 8-foot ceiling height probably in the main building. And I think you have a foot or two to play with potentially in a bringing this down a bit.
Easy to accomplish.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other questions at this time for them? No other questions? Anyone in this audience wishing to comment on this particular project? It appears no, there's comes Stephanie and Stephanie. Stephanie, get sworn in, please.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Stephanie Benenato, P.O. Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I think there has been improvements on this building. I like the idea of the dividing the garages. And I do like the Mr. Guida's suggestion to step down. I think there's a lot of loss, though, of opening on, I guess, was the primary facade, which I'm not that happy about. I thought it felt more light-filled. This feels much more like a fortress, actually. And I really think it is a bad precedent for scale because this is way more than 50% of what was there. And I'd really like to know, is this like hardship for like what would be reasonable use of the property? Or is this hardship because we really want these things? And we can't live without them? Because I really think there's a big difference in that kind of, how do we define hardship? And although the renderings look really nice, that wall in the front looks much lower than 4 feet to me. And when you look at the elevations, it's higher. You don't see as much of the window or the bottom of the home, that facade that is shown on the renderings. So I would just ask you to look at the elevations to actually see the height and what is being covered on that elevation. Thank you.
You have another person that wishes to speak? Mr. Eddie, get sworn in.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I thank
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
John Eddy, number 14, Avenida Campo Verde, Santa Fe. Madam Chair, board members, thank you. I appreciate the architect's moves that he's been making on this, and I think he has improved the project. I do still share concerns about height, and I'm glad that Board Member Guida brought up the suggestions that he brought up. I also still do think that the walls are too high, and what worries me there is that I think it begins to set a precedent for the remaining properties in this development to encourage people that they can wall in their properties. I understand the need for privacy and a little bit of security in the sense of containing properties, but I also think that bringing those walls down will still give a sense of security and ownership to the property, but not appear as much imposing on the massing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Yes, Heather.
Chair Rios, there are no hands raised on Zoom. I would like to point out one thing. It's not super clear on the site plan, but in the rendering, there was a wall around the back of the garages. And per the warranty deed, there is an access easement that is given to El Castillo. And so there may be a need to eliminate that wall based on the location of the access easement. So just wanted to make clear that.
It
Madam-
seems like Mr. Padilla is aware of that.
Madam Chair, in reference to that, we have done our due diligence in searching for that easement. That easement is not, we cannot find the documentation, the recordation within county records. We will coordinate with El Castillo and El Sequoia on their need for access. It originally was access to the backside of the Ghost Ranch Convention Center. So that allowed also ingress egress for the parking areas that were the tenants of the development. Now it's used as it's used as an access way for service trucks and maintenance people to load their materials and so forth. But we will work with El Castillo and El Sequoia on assuring that if there is access needed, that they would have access to that. We will make sure that we will endeavor to work with them to make sure that is covered.
John, in
Probably come
reference,
up in zoning also.
okay. In reference, yes, Heather.
And I would suggest, John, that you also contact fire, because I think the fire room for the El Castillo is there. So fire access might be required.
John, and when you first came to the board, you were requesting 6-foot high walls, all the way 6 feet.
Correct.
And would you indicate to us again what they are at this point?
The only element of the yard walls that is 6 foot are the pilasters that are at the transition point of wall to gates. That is the only place where the 6
Right,
foot
and
height
the
is
rest
there.
of the walls
The
are,
rest will transition from that 6 foot to 5 to 4. And what we may end up doing is increasing that 4-foot dimension appropriately as we start framing that wall. But there is a good portion of the walls, both on 126 and 128, that are 4 foot high. And on 128, we end up with that north wall along the north property line. We actually stagger that wall because of the length of the wall. It's almost 75 to 80 feet. So we've actually got a 5-foot wall that staggers back, that offsets, and then drops to 4 and then comes back up to 5. So we tried to get a rhythm to the 5 and 4 foot walls. Any less than 4, if we go to 3, it's not, I mean, I understand the concern, and these are individual units now that are owned by individuals. So they will want to have some privacy, some security to that. My client is willing to drop to 4 as much as they can, make it more appealing, not only for them, but for the neighborhood also.
Thank you, John. If there are no further questions, no one else needing to comment, yes, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, just another
Yes.
couple questions for the applicant. Sorry, John. I'd like a little bit more clarification on the windows and doors. I think Madam Chair has already kind of run through the discussion of the requested removal of mechanical doors and additional unit doors on the north facade. I imagine you're keeping the metal casements on the primary facade. Those will be retained.
Madam Chair, Member Guida, the windows that we are proposing to replace, they are replaced in kind. So they will be we've utilized Ray Patterson on our analysis. We also will be replacing them in kind. So the size, the division, the lights in them will be exactly the same. The window that appears here in the image is a double casement. So they will be double casement. The windows that at the doorway entry is a corner casement. Those will remain. We did not eliminate those corner casements because they are pretty unique. And we will be replacing them in kind.
With steel casement windows in kind?
Well, I mean, the term in kind is, it can be, I mean, we will be replacing them so they look exactly like what was there before. Whether they're the material that we choose right now would end up being a steel window that we would come back with. But it would be, thicker glass, a little more energy efficient, newer type windows, but same size. We're not changing dimensionally width or height, or the glazing patterns. Those will remain intact.
Right. So I guess I'm looking for a little bit more clarity on that, because we have a primary facade. It has existing windows. You're right, they are very special. There are other cases where we've required retaining or repairing existing windows. I mean, I don't love that from an energy standpoint, but I also know that it would be very difficult to replicate either the thinness of steel casement windows in general, or particularly that corner detail. And I guess we also know that this is a fully registered design building. This is, we have some pretty fantastic panel doors. I really would like to know more about what might be retained and repaired. If it is being replaced in kind, I'd like to know the specifics of that. If, like for like, that's what that means to me. If there's the opportunity to salvage and reinstall the wood doors, elsewhere in the project. I know you do have a lot of exterior doors in the project. It would seem to me an opportunity, because most of those are 3-foot doors, to go and install those if possible in other places in the project. And then what's a compatible new window for the rest of the building? How are you selecting a window? I'm just not seeing it in the case report, and maybe the board can suggest it as if this is going towards approval, suggest a pathway. Are you opposed to, is it the case that the existing steel windows cannot be retained? Are they beyond repair?
No, they are not, Madam Chair, Member Guida, they are not beyond repair. I could coordinate with the owners. It might be something that, you know, they are under a portal. They could be serviced, so to speak, to make sure that one, they're operational, and two, that they can actually be secured. You know, the project has been abandoned or for going on 5 years now, I think. So a lot of the maintenance items had not been taken care of. So just sitting vacant over time could cause the operation of those windows to be compromised. So I mean, we could look, and I think the owner might be open to if the path to approval is to repair those, that could be an option that we could look at. And if it's a condition of approval, then we're more than happy to look at that.
Okay.
And also looking at the style of the windows and doors for the rest of the project. I think you're right. I feel that you're right. The doors that we're taking off of the mechanical rooms could be incorporated, repurposed in some other areas, because we do have doors that are entry points around the project now, whether it's the existing condition or the addition, that we could possibly look at incorporating those into the final design. The windows would be similar in patterns, not necessarily steel casement, but they would be similar in pattern, going with the narrower frames, and the muttons being narrower also. We could look at doing that so that they appear or they are sympathetic to the original window style.
Thank you, John. And I know, you know, with the exception of the primary facade, there's some other windows of the project that have been replaced over the years that are non-historic. And but I think it's an important aspect for maintaining the quality of this resource. Thank you.
Board members, are there any other further questions or comments? Member Beachside.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you tell us how tall the yard wall is at the back of the residence, around the garages? What is the height of that wall?
The proposed, Madam Chair, Member Beachside, the proposed wall, the what we'll call the courtyard wall, drive court wall there, it is proposed at 6 feet right now. A wall of 5 feet would be acceptable. I think anything lower might be a little not as inviting to the owners to secure the area. We are proposing it at 6 foot with 6 foot gates.
Yeah, I think my main concern is with the addition of the walls in general, on the elevations, the south facade elevations that are in our packet, look really nice with the new party walls that you've added. And that's exactly what we were after, like that division. We don't have the elevations with the wall in place, but I think that similar to the north elevation really cuts that detail, making the whole facade, you know, seem different. The compound or the neighborhood, the surrounding streetscape in general does not have walls of this height. So I think I'm glad you're willing to compromise on that. I think that bring it down at least to 5 on the back. And I understand in the back where you have your cars in your garage, you might want it to be your trash, whatever. It might be good to have it to be taller, but the primary facade is the north, and I understand the need for some security and definition of property, but I really don't think it fits the streetscape. And I don't know if more fenestration is possible in some areas, or what could be done exactly. But yeah, the walls are really out of character in my mind for this.
Madam Chair, Member Beachside, I think what we could do, I feel that, you know, a 5 foot wall would be acceptable. The other thing, now that I look at the rendering, is the fact that it is a very long wall. The idea of the possibility of introducing some pilasters on it and maybe actually having it have a rhythm to it, maybe 4 or 5, are offset a foot or so that it's not just one continuous wall, that when you look at it, it has a rhythm or a pattern to it, so that it's not just, a mask of wall going down there. So
Yeah, I think
that's more than acceptable.
something like that. And you would have a better idea than I, but maybe the pilasters could align with the party walls, or there could be a lower wall so that you can still see that striking detail of the primary facade.
Yes, Heather.
Chair Rios, just so that Mr. Padilla knows, there's an instrument number, and I'm going to ask Ed Hill tomorrow to look up the easement, maybe to assist you in that regard.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, are we ready to make a motion? Member Guido, you've got everything in your head?
I think so.
Okay.
Or on paper.
Or on paper.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, for the first case.
First case, 2023-007-678 HDRB 126 Camino Santiago. I move that the board approve the project as submitted, finding that the exception criteria have been met, and adding the following conditions of approval. That on the north primary facade, the existing steel casement windows be retained and repaired as part of the project. And that the entry door be a reuse of the existing wood door, that it be repaired. Also require that the applicant indicate in a submittal to staff the selection of new windows to be used throughout the project that are compatible with the appearance and light division of the existing historic windows, thin muntins and thin frames, and compatible in that regard. That the height of the bunkhouse and garage be lowered by at least 1 foot, preferably 1.5 to 2 feet across the board, to become more in scale with the historic part of the building. And lastly, that the walls and gate around the motor court, vehicular court, be reduced from 6 feet to 5 feet, and that the applicant also include or incorporate pilasters similar to those being used on the front yard walls. That's it.
Is there a second to this motion? Member Beachlight? I mean, Member Benvenu, also known as Member Benvenu, and I'm looking right at you.
All right, Beach I will second. And maybe just ask for a little discussion on the front yard walls. I mean, I would like those to be as low as possible so that we can see the front facade. I'm not quite sure what to suggest as a condition for accomplishing that. I feel like they shouldn't be any higher than, I mean, preferably no wall at all, but if we have to have a wall, like maybe 4 feet or some other design that allows you to see more of what makes this building, special. I don't know if anyone has suggestions or comments on what we can do with the front walls.
Hey, hold on. Did somebody second that motion?
Member
Member
Beachlight.
Member Beachlight, yeah. And is that an amendment?
Well,
Friendly amendment?
I mean,
Because
just a
it
request
appeared
for
that the
discussion.
applicant was willing to do that. He indicated.
So, Member Bichette, I would suggest, and I would accept this as friendly, that the applicant also reduce the front yard walls a little bit further in height, retaining the kind of multiple height aspect of them, and perhaps reducing them to 3.5 to 4.5 feet as a kind of compromise.
And perhaps looking at additional fenestration or placements of the pilasters to align with details of the primary facade, or lower walls so that you can see the party walls. And those.
Madam Chair, Member Beachside, I mean, there's a point of diminishing return by wanting to lower it at some point. At some point, when do we meet that right height? Because the rendering shows it shows somebody up above the wall looking in. Another rendering would have the elevation show you from street level looking straight in. I mean, is it 3 foot? Is it 3.5 foot? Might as well get rid of the wall completely. And that's not the desire of the owner. I would not be comfortable agreeing at this point, at this meeting, to a wall height that is 3 to 3.5 feet to 4 to 4 feet. We wanted 6 foot all the way around. The owners have agreed to let the wall have some rhythm to it of 4 to 5. Maybe what we could do is to look at having as much 4-foot wall height as possible. One, just because of security. I mean, they all have kids. They all have pets and so forth out in the yard. A 4-foot wall is sometimes easy to reach over. So the idea of security, the idea of maintaining a front yard, I think to dictate now that the maximum height that you can do it is 3.5. I think that's setting a precedence that I don't feel that's acceptable at this time.
Okay.
I'm happy with more 4-foot. Incorporating, like I said, the only place that we would be higher would be at the pilasters. So, I'm happy to agree to the 5 foot in the back motor court wall, and changing the rhythm of that with pilasters, even offsets in the wall. But to go any lower than 4 feet, Madam Chair, member Beachside, I appreciate that. And the front facade, the primary facade, respecting that, I understand. I don't think there's anything that states that we cannot do yard walls, and to limit us to a 3-foot yard wall, 3.5-foot yard wall, I think would be the wrong precedence to set.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Padilla. Actually, when we're in the middle of a motion, we should continue the motion, but I thought that it was important to hear your comments. And so I'm going to ask the maker of the motion to reiterate
On the front yard wall, I think the
reference to the
acceptance
wall.
of the friendly amendment was to request that the applicant maintain the kind of stepped or multiple height aspect of the wall, but reduce it slightly further to a range between 3.5 to 4.5 feet.
I think that's reasonable. I guess just for discussion, I think this Monte del Sol is a gated community. So the security risk is minimized in that respect. It's also not a well-traveled street. And I think my main concern is that if we allow a 5-foot, 6-foot wall on this property, there's many more to come. It changes the whole nature of this streetscape. The way it relates to each other now, it was designed for those buildings to interact with one another and the spaces around them. I think we're beginning to lose that with this project. So that, that's the origin of my comment.
So that is what you're indicating, 3.5 to 4.5. Okay, another friendly amendment?
But possibly,
Member
Madam Chair.
Benvenu.
So I'm not clear on what just was resolved on the first friendly amendment. Did you amend the motion in response to Member Beachside, or did
Yes,
you?
to require that the front yard wall heights be reduced a little bit further in height from 4 and 5 feet to 3.5 and 4.5.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. I'd like a friendly amendment on the back wall, which would be that in addition to pilasters, that there also be modulation of the wall height, and that there also be setbacks every 50 feet minimum, both of which a minimum of 1 foot every 50 feet of linear length, both of which are consistent with our fence guidelines. And I think that would actually be a big improvement of that. Knowing that you do need security on that wall, I don't think that would reduce that aspect.
Also accepted as friendly.
Anything else? Heather?
Thank you, Chair Rios. Just a point of clarification regarding the historic windows on the primary facade. a couple of the windows were being proposed for infill. So I'm just want to clarify, because you said they should be retained and repaired. Do you still
Thank you,
allow
Heather.
for
For the windows that are being retained, they should be the historic ones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think
And-
those ones that
no.
are getting infilled, those are bathrooms.
Right. And then I guess if I didn't say it before, that all of these things, we would ask that the applicant update drawings and the packet, return it to staff for final approval.
Okay, I think we covered everything. And I will ask for a vote. No, roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Okay. Member Guida,
Yes.
member Aguilar Medrano, member Beachside,
Yes.
member Bienvenue.
Yes,
The
and
motion
I'd
has-
just like to make a comment that I just want to express gratitude to the applicant for what you've done in this project. The renderings were extremely helpful. Appreciate that. That's always something we love to see. It makes our job a lot easier. And your willingness to listen to the board's comments, to respond to them appropriately, both before this presentation and during the presentation, is just really wonderful collaborative work. And I think it's going to make a much better project for the city and for your client. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do have a question. I know you've already made a motion.
We're in the middle of a vote, I think.
No, I
Oh,
think
you already
that was-
voted?
No.
I voted
we already
yes.
voted.
Okay. Are we done?
The motion's
Oh,
been approved.
We
Okay,
did.
thank you.
Did you
That
do-
was the part that we didn't hear. Sorry.
Did we already do the second one? too?
No, we're going to do that.
I'm gonna do the second one. I'm getting confused. Yes, John.
So Madam Chair, the recommendation of 4.5 to 3.5 feet, that tells me there's no 5-foot wall, there's no 6-foot pilasters. Is that correct?
Okay, now we're gonna go to the second case, which is located at 128 Camino Santiago. Is someone ready to make a motion on this?
I'll make rinse and repeat motion on 128 Camino Santiago. So case 2023-007-680 HDRB 128 Camino Santiago. I move that the board approve the application as submitted, noting that the exception criteria have been met with the following conditions of approval. That the existing windows that are to remain on the primary facade and doors be retained as the original and repaired and not replaced. That the new windows that are part of the proposal elsewhere other than the primary facade be sympathetic in style and appearance to the historic windows, thin muntins and thin frames. That the height of the garage addition to the south be reduced in height at least 1 foot and preferably 1.5 to 2 feet in overall height. That the vehicular courtyard wall that's associated with 128 be reduced in height from 6 to 5 feet, that pilasters be incorporated, and that the offsets and modulation of the wall as recommended by Member Bienvenue also be incorporated into the design. And lastly, that the front yard wall, that the overall design of stepping heights and rounded pilasters be retained, but that the overall heights be reduced from 4 and 5 feet to 3.5 and 4.5 feet. And that the applicant return or update the drawings and window selection and supply it to staff for final approval.
Do I hear a second?
Beachside seconds.
And is there anything further to add to this motion? Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Oh. Yes, Heather, apologies.
Thank you, Chair Rios. Just a point of clarification, you didn't have anything on the existing front doors?
I did. The windows, I explained that the existing windows and door that are to remain in the north facade be retained.
Wanted to be sure. Thank you.
Nope, thank you.
May we have the roll call vote?
Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Gracias.
And I'd like to, make sure that I acknowledge staff and their assistance with developing the documentation to come back to you. That was very helpful. So thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Okay, the next case is Paul's case that we move on to new business. And that case is located at 1239 Cerro Gordo. Paul, may we hear you? And Melissa, will you help me with the 2 minutes? Thank you.
Chair Rios, members of the board, thank you for this evening. Is the applicant, is Kate Steck here? Chair Rios,
The applicant is not here?
that's correct, Chair.
Chair Rios, she is on Zoom.
Oh, she is on Zoom. Okay, you can go forward, Paul.
My apologies, Chair. Thank you, Heather. In case number 2024007941 HDRB 1239 Cerro Gordo Road for a status review, the home is a single-family residence listed as non-contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The structure was constructed in the mid to late 1970s on a 0.18 acre lot and is 1,649 square feet. The house is built in the Pueblo Revival style and is constructed from wood frame and with a flat square roof. The exterior of the building has rounded fenestrations throughout the building's facades. The structure has divided light windows with the divides in white and adobe brown cementitious stucco. Given that the structure has underwent extensive renovations in the early 2000s, the historic footprint of the home is no longer legible. So currently we're looking at the south facade of the structure. The portal on this structure was added in between 1983 into the early 2000s. The bump out on the eastern facade, as we see here, looking north, was added in 1983. So this home does not currently have an original footprint that is publicly visible. Everything has been renovated, added on, and it's a beautiful home with a Pueblo Revival style seen throughout the entire home on this eastern facade, the south facade. But it just currently doesn't have any of its historic footprint. Here's a photograph from the north facade showing the patio was added on in the late 1970s, as seen through historic photos, and the western facade as can be seen along the boundary line. Here's a historic photo from 1978. Prior to the exact date of the construction of this home is uncertain, but through John Murphy's research, he did great research on this property, and he was able to provide that up until the mid to late 1970s, there was nothing on that parcel. And then in 1978, there was a constructed home. And so we know that it currently doesn't quite meet the 50 years. However, I mean, if it held that integrity of that historic structure, I mean, that's something that we could look at, I believe, but we just don't see that. I apologize. So here's a 1983 survey photograph that we have that was done from a previous HCPI form. We could see the bump out has now on that eastern facade has been constructed plate glass in the front, vigas on the southern facade as well. Here's in 2003 an artist rendering of the property, and now you can see what it looks like today as the photographs. But here's a rendering of what it of that 2003 renovation. The plat map of the property, the garage and the storage room that was constructed in the late in the 1980s into the 2000s, in early 2000s. And here's a photograph of that south and eastern facade. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be maintained as non-contributing per 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. Staff stands for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul, board members? No questions at this time. Applicants, can you hear us?
One moment, Chair Rios. Ms. Steck and Mr. Taylor, I've allowed you to speak and you can unmute if you're going to speak. Please state your name and address for the record and be sworn.
My name is Keita Steck. I live, my residence is 1239 Cerro Gordo Road, Santa Fe.
And I'm Brian Taylor, same residence, 1239 Cerro Gordo Road, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87501.
Thank you. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you both agree with staff's recommendation?
Yes.
Yes, we
Do you
do.
have and do you have anything further to add?
No.
Neither one of you?
Nope.
Let's see if anyone in this audience wishes to comment on this particular case. Anyone wanting to come forward? No, it appears not. Anyone on Zoom? Anyone further on Zoom? No? Board members, Member Benvenu, ready to make a motion?
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an interesting case because it's actually quite a lovely house, and I think it actually has a big impact on the street. The way it sits up above the street, looks down on it, and presents a very, very handsome traditional front. But surprisingly, it's not historic. And so I agree completely that with staff's recommendation that it be non-contributing, although I hope that that the loveliness of that front-facing facade is retained in any future renovation projects. So with that, in case 2024-007941 HDRB 1239 Cerro Gordo Road, consistent with staff's recommendation and the record as presented, I move that the structure be maintained as non-contributing.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Thank you. If there's nothing further to add, may we have a roll call vote?
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to a lot of cases that are before us that are here in reference to capital outlay projects. And we have 7 cases before us. And it was suggested to me, and I agreed, that it probably would be a good idea to hear, in order to be more efficient, to hear all the cases, to hear the background of all the cases, and then we would make a motion pertaining to each case. Heather, because I think that a lot of the comments would be repeated if we have each case separate. I think that it made sense to me. And I hope that you agree.
Chair Rios, I had it organized as we did with the status hearings, where 128 and 130 South Capitol Street would be one set. And then the bungalows on Don Gaspar would be another set. But I'm certainly happy to give both presentations, and then we can just remember.
And then if people want to speak in reference to a particular one, that's what we can do.
Correct, yeah. And certainly the board would just have to remember to make 7 motions.
Yes, absolutely.
Madam Chair, it's
Yes.
6 motions, right? Is it 7?
6 motions, my
6 motions.
apologies.
Is it 6?
Yeah. It's 6. C, D, E, F, G, and H.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You are correct.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for catching that. It is 6. Okay. Heather, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Rios. One moment while I share my screen on Zoom.
And ladies and gentlemen, this has to do only with demos. We are not going to discuss we are not going to delve into the future of what if, let's say, if the demos would occur. We're not going to go there. It's simply the demolitions.
Madam Chair, I don't know that that's true. I think the exception criteria depend on streetscape conditions and the
Well, I think
proposed.
we can discuss, indicate streetscape. I think
Right, but the
that-
proposed plan
yeah.
is part of the presentation tonight, at least from the applicant, and it's part of the packet.
I would agree that in order to consider demolition, I would think I would at least need to hear about the proposed project, even knowing it's preliminary in design and hasn't been approved, and in fact, hasn't even been subject to the collaborative process yet that is required by our ordinance and the statute.
I don't know, that really doesn't make sense to me. But if that is already something that is part of the process, the project, what was presented or what needs to be presented or what board members feel that you need to hear that prior to making a decision on demos, we will go forward with that.
Right, thank you, Chair Rios. With reference to the PowerPoint, can IT please share the screen for the PowerPoint? It's coming from my computer. Just one moment, please. Thank you, Izzy. With reference to this case, the request for demolition will be for 6 buildings on one block. The first presentation I will make is on 128 South Capitol Building or Street, which is the Contra Ortiz Pino building, as well as 130. Actually, I think I have those addresses maybe switched, but South Capitol Street, which is the Fleet building, as well as the garage building on that site. So the requests for demolition, and I'm going to go over the criteria really quick as we launch into the conversation and then repeat them at the end as well. So back on May 9th, the historic status for the Fleet and garage buildings was given as non-contributing on that site. And before granting approval or denial for a demolition request, the board needs to make a particular finding for the structures under consideration, in this case, the 2 Fleet structures. In determining whether a request for demolition in a historic district shall be approved or denied, the board needs to consider whether the structure is of historical importance, whether the structure for which demolition is requested is an essential part of a unique street section or block front, and whether that street section or block front will be reestablished by any proposed structure, and the state of structural stability or repair that's under consideration. So with reference to these two buildings, they're designated as non-contributing. And then also in your packet is a report from the chief building official regarding structural stability. The staff report has addressed the significance of the structures and other information and background as appropriate. Also, with reference to section 14-5.2M, state capital outlay projects, there is a specific reference to these demolition criteria, which can be found under section 14-3.14 of the code. Just to provide a little background or refresher from what we discussed on May 9th as to the status, this block was originally full of bungalows and were typical of the sort of Anglo-American development pattern found in the Don Gaspar area historic district. This site is in the downtown East Side Historic District. You can see at the site of the existing Capitol that block pattern was being established by 1930. This is the 1930 Sanborn map. An aerial from 1958 still shows that block pattern, which includes the bungalows that we'll be discussing in the next presentation. By 1969, William Kruger actually developed and designed and developed the Ponce Ortiz y Pino building, which can be seen here. There was parking adjacent to the building, and the Fleet building was extant on the site, but not the garage building in 1969. So this is 130 South Capitol Street. The Fleet building is a smaller building to the right of the Ponce Ortiz y Pino building, and the garage building is set back from that Fleet building. This is a demolition plan that was created at that time. There were 3 bungalows on the site. And you can see at that time, the site as it was, which is larger now, illustrates the parking as well as the building itself. And the architectural design was in a modified territorial revival modernist style. As to street section and block front, you can see a better picture of the Fleet building. It does not have much presence on that street section or block front, as does the garage, which is tucked back into the site. So as to the importance of the street section or block front, staff is of the opinion that it does not have much impact. With reference to the state capital outlay projects, that section M that I was referencing, I'm just going to read this so we're all clear. State capital outlay projects that involve contributing significant or landmark structures, and this is non-contributing, shall be undertaken in a manner so as to preserve the status of the structure. And then also another section that does apply is for demolition of historic or landmark structures, minimum maintenance standards shall be met. But in this particular case, these 2 buildings are designated as non-contributing. And so with reference to 128 South Capitol Street, as to the criteria for demolition for those Fleet and garage buildings, whether the structure is of historical importance, it was determined by the board as no. Whether the structure for demolition is requested part of an essential part of a unique strict section or block front, the answer is no, and the state of structural stability and repair is fair. I went ahead and did combine this slide because I anticipated this request. So as to 130 South Capitol Street, you've seen the context and at the time it was developed. Whether the structure, because it was designated as contributing, is of historical importance is yes. Whether the structure for demolition is requested as a essential part of a unique street section or block front is yes. And the state of repair and structural stability per the chief building official is fair. And so Demolition is recommended for approval on the fleet buildings and the garage building, but demolition is not recommended for approval for the Concha Ortiz y Pino building. And just to also add to the context, so this is a view of the street section and block front. The parking was added after the original construction of the Concha Ortiz y Pino building, but it is part of that overall site, and you really can't see the overall impact of the fleet buildings on the farthest edge adjacent to Galisteo Street. And in terms of the street section or block front, this is what is the conceptual drawing, part of the conceptual drawing set. And as you can see, the 56,000 square foot building will take up most of that block front. And there is a conceptual elevation that has been provided. So the building will be approximately 3 stories, varying in height. As you can see, the street itself does slope down towards Galisteo. So there's a varying heights, and it is articulated with portals on the north elevation. So that concludes my presentation for those 3 buildings. Are there any questions before I proceed on to the bungalows, or do you want to hold questions for later?
Any questions, board members? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, I don't want to interrupt your flow. The minimum maintenance requirements, that you referred to, is that part of the capital outlay condition?
Yes.
And what are the minimum maintenance what's that issue?
The minimum maintenance standards require that any contributing, designated historic structures or above significant landmark are required to meet those minimum maintenance standards. And so this was for the bungalows. Demolition was considered in 2011 and was denied at that time, and the project did not proceed forward. There is a standard for minimum maintenance of the structures, and there has been a lot of deferred maintenance since 2011.
Okay. And I mean, generally speaking, the minimum maintenance standards is not these exception criteria that we're talking about. It's like keep the building in good condition.
That is correct.
Okay, got it.
There are offices in those bungalows, but Chair Guida or Member Guida, but the buildings themselves have not been maintained.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, continue, Heather.
And one moment while I promote Member Mather. She is on now. And Member Mather, when the time comes, you can unmute to speak. So for the next presentation, one moment, let me stop sharing and share the right thing.
Hey, Heather, I just want you to know I'm here.
Yes, thank you, Member Mather. Lots of windows going at the same time. So with reference to the demolition request for the eastern portion of the block, these bungalows do represent some of the remnant of that original development pattern on the site. The site originally, when it was, this is from in the 1890s, this map, was located to the south of the original Capitol building itself. But you can see that the lots are organized in sort of those long lots that we find in other parts of the town that, in other parts of Santa Fe that typically represented a residence plus open space and agricultural area to the back of that, those houses. It was divided up, and you can see that the bungalows were constructed by 1912. Along or across from the Capitol. These bungalows that we're considering right now, though, were not constructed as of that time. The 1921 Sanborn shows the construction of the Presbyterian Church, as well as 2 of the residences that have since been demolished. The residences themselves that are in yellow here were demolished in 1991. The subject buildings that we're discussing, 3 of them were constructed by 1930. The 4th one, which is the duplex, which is at the intersection, the south west corner of Capitol and Don Gaspar, was not built until, or shown until approximately 1948. So it was between 1930 and 1948. This is the 1958 aerial. There was also one other building that was located to the west of the U-shaped building, located to the west of these bungalows. That was demolished. I'm uncertain. I tried to do some research, uncertain as to when that was demolished. Maybe the applicant has information on that. So by 1969, you can see that building just to the west still there. The bungalows are still present. There are 2 houses because of the development of the Paseo de Peralta. The church has since been demolished, but the 2 houses that were demolished in 1991 were still present. And you can see to the west of the Concha Ortiz y Pino building, the structures that we just considered. The garage structure was not constructed, and the fleet building has been constructed. And the lot has been all consolidated to where the parking garage is now as to state ownership at that time. This is a view from 1956 of the bungalows as they were, the church being demolished, the two bungalows to the south of the 4 structures were demolished in 1991. And then the reason I illustrate or provide this photo is to provide information as to the street section that was established at that time in 1956. So once again, this is an overview of those minimum maintenance standards, as well as the requirement that the status be preserved for state capital outlay projects. And these buildings are all designated as contributing, both the garage as well as the main structures. This is a view of the 402 Don Gaspar, which was built by 1948. Both the duplex and the garage are designated as contributing. And so as to address the demolition criteria for each building, so the duplex and the garage is the structure of historic importance, yes, as determined by its conditioning status or contributing status. Whether it is part of a central street section, yes. And whether the state of repair and structural stability is fair as discussed by the chief building official. However, these buildings have not been maintained over time. For 406 Don Gaspar, it was built between 1921 and 1930. Both the bungalow and the garage are designated as contributing. Going to the demolition criteria, the structure is considered of historic importance. The structure for which the demolition is requested is an essential part of a street section, yes. And the state of repair is fair. And for all of the bungalows, just so the board knows, the staff is not recommending approval of demolition of the bungalows. And so for 410, built between 1921 and 1930, designated as contributing for both the garage and the building itself. And so therefore it is of historic importance and is part of an essential block front and street section. And the structural stability is considered fair, and staff does not recommend approval for that. On this last bungalow, the garage at some point was demolished. That was originally part of this property. Probably with the construction of the parking garage, the main structure still stands and is designated as contributing. And staff does not recommend approval for demolition, as it is of historic importance and is part of an essential street section or unique street section and block front. And the state of repair and structural stability is fair, but it can be preserved. Also, these photographs that you see here illustrate the rear of all the bungalows. You can see that they're all the same design, but articulated architecturally differently for each of the bungalows. This is the street section as it currently stands today. The bungalows are set back from the sidewalk approximately 20 feet. I'm sorry, 15 to 20 feet, and do represent sort of that typical development pattern that you would find in the Don Gaspar Historic District, even though this is in the downtown and East Side Historic District. And once again, providing an overview, the building is set back of similar nature on the corner that is closest to Don Gaspar and South Capitol, but it does curve back and step back further. And I can defer to the applicant as to how they want to, or how they're representing the street section or block front. But the elevation here that you see represents the elevation that will be present with the 3 stories on that street section. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Heather. Board members, do you have any comments or questions, clarification, or any type at this time? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, a question about block front. You've indicated that in both the cases of the Four Casitas and of the Concha Ortiz building, that staff believes, yes, these are an essential part of a unique street section or block front. Can you tell me how staff has come to that conclusion?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, specifically with reference to the bungalows, that is unique in the overall Capitol campus area and does represent the remnant of the neighborhood that was there. So that is a unique street section or block front. As to the Concha Ortiz y Pino building, the placement of the building is different from the rest of the site, and certainly parking was established, but that sort of vacant area that it represents, that is the parking area, has been like that and that in that configuration since the construction or shortly after the construction of the building. So a new building that potentially would replace it may benefit from having some sort of setback to be reminiscent of that void that's at the Concha Ortiz y Pino building. And then with reference to the fleet buildings, they're really not a significant presence on the street section or block front.
Thank you for that. I guess, and we'll undoubtedly talk about this some more, but what really kind of rises to the surface for me is, essential part of a unique street section or block front is similar, but not the same as contributing to a historic district or in harmony with the streetscape. I mean, they all seem to be very similar things, and they're probably all up for some debate and discussion. To me, this is the one that we have to follow, though, the kind of essential part of a unique street section or block front. And it's tremendously vague to me. Like, yeah, a kind of empty parking lot and a building that's just kind of randomly over there might be a unique block front. But it really doesn't get at like why or what we're looking for here. And so we'll undoubtedly talk more, but one of the things, for me, at least with the casitas, is their island status, that, that they're no longer part of a context that exists anymore. And I think it's probably more arguable on the Concha Ortiz building. I'm thinking about the recent statusing of that building. I don't know that streetscape or block front or relationship to other buildings in the Capitol complex was identified as a feature of that statusing as much as mid-century design or association with Kruger, like those kinds of things. So just kind of noting that, and I was curious, and I appreciate you explaining staff's justification.
Certainly, and if Chair Rios, if I make a note on process. So this is a unique process, the state capital outlay process. The reason that we decided in collaboration with committee members, the subcommittee of the board, which represents Member Beachside as well as Member Bienvenue, was to first consider the demolition in order to help better inform the design. This is the conceptual design that has been presented by the design team that has been hired by the state. So as to be able to have collaboration on the proposed design, the board or the subcommittee wanted to know what there was to work with. So that is why this is being heard separately. And also, since this committee has been designated by the board, the subcommittee, as we proceed forward on the design consultation, the governing body will be appointing officially these two as subcommittee members representing the city in that collaborative effort. But at this point, it's a very difficult process because how can you consider the design before understanding what the demolition is? They're two separate sections under subsection M. And so, so this is the best approach we identified as the way forward. And there was a community meeting that was held on January 18th regarding this proposal, mostly discussing the demolition and not really just addressing the proposed design.
Thank you, Heather. Any other board members wishing to comment at this time? If not, will the applicant or applicants please come forward?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jennifer Jenkins, 130 Grant Avenue, Santa Fe, 87501. Good evening, Chair Rios, board members. I'm Jennifer Jenkins with Jenkins Gavin. I'm here this evening on behalf of the state of New Mexico and the General Services Department with respect to the demolition request that Heather shared with you about here just a moment ago. I'm going to make a couple of brief introductions. I'm joined this evening by the Deputy Secretary of the General Services Department, Anna Silva, and as well as in-house counsel, Raul Burciaga. Let me just plug in my technology and I could have the screen. Thank you.
Technology is great until it isn't. Right? So just bear with us. Can you give us an update on what's going on?
It's Charios. So as soon as I receive the email, I'll bring it up and then I can share the presentation on my side. And then Jennifer will just tell me when to advance. Can you remind me how we get to full screen?
Control L.
Thank you.
There we. Okay, great. Thank you, Heather. Let's-
My apologies for the delay.
Okay, so just go to the first slide. So just touching on a little bit, just what the regulations are that we're operating under this evening. As a capital outlay project, there are specific rules that pertain to demolition as well as pertain to design review. So as was previously discussed a moment ago, as part of a demolition application, one of the criteria for demolition is you have to demonstrate how you are going to be reestablishing a streetscape. So in order for us to comply with that requirement for the demolition requests, we got with the design team and went through a pretty thorough exercise to really think about the skin of this building. And looking at what does the site really accommodate and looking at the surroundings and access and all of this. So we prepared a design concept at the direction of staff to address, we pretty much have three streetscapes. We have Don Gaspar, Galisteo, and South Capitol. The south side of the building is right up against the Capitol parking garage, so really no streetscape there to worry about. So we developed a concept and that, you know, looking at the main Capitol campus and the vernacular that has become omnipresent in the Capitol campus and being respectful of that, and looking at all those factors. And so that is what we have this evening that I'd like to present to you. But it's really important to point out that the formal design for this new proposed building has not commenced yet. We went through an exercise when we have this exterior concept that will be further developed, further vetted in collaboration with the city through the process outlined in Section M. As Heather mentioned, we did have a community meeting that is really part of the design process, that type of outreach, but also at the direction of staff, they said, let's go ahead and let's do that now. So we said, okay, fine. So we had a meeting, we did show pretty much everything I'm going to show you this evening with respect to the exterior concept for the building and discussed the demolition. So we reached out to our stakeholders relative to all the area neighborhood associations in the vicinity of the site, the AIA, the Old Santa Fe Association, the Historic Santa Fe Foundation, as well as city staff. And so we had a nice turnout and had a robust discussion that evening. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. So a little bit of background. I'm just going to look at my computer here so you can see it a little better. As also as Heather mentioned, the historic status of these properties was originally established in 2012 when the executive office building was in its early planning stages. This project has really been in the planning stages since about 2010. And then the project was put on hold during that particular administration. And several studies and efforts went on around facility planning citywide for the state and their needs, as well as the main Capitol campus planning. So there was an extensive needs assessment that was engaged in. And it was determined that there is a significant space needs for the state, especially in this location as part of the main Capitol. So we had new historic property cultural inventories done. We came before you last year and revisited status. And we ended up with some upgrades, some downgrades. And so the motor pool building and the garage building were a status as non-contributing, and the balance of the structures were established as contributing. And then in October, we submitted the application. We submitted the application for demo, and then we had our community meeting on January 18th. So,
Jennifer, may I ask that you speak directly into the microphone? You're fading in and out.
yeah, I will. I'm sorry. I'll stop moving around. So this is just a map of the Capitol campus. So you can see the big red circle right in the middle is the state capitol, and then all of those buildings. So this is really what has developed over time and has really become a very unique, distinct historic district, essentially in and of itself. It has a very unique purpose, has a very unique history as it's developed over time. And interestingly, there was a push decades ago to establish a separate historic district for the Capitol campus, but that never got any legs or was never, codified. But I think we can all agree that that area of downtown, again, is utterly unique in terms of its purpose, in terms of its landscape, and in terms of its architecture. Let's go to the next slide. And then this just shows where the property is relative to the downtown and east side historic district and the Don Gaspar historic district to the south. As you might recall, during the status review, we made the case, there was a lot of discussion about that these buildings really align more with the development pattern of the Don Gaspar historic district. We did not disagree with that. But it does not reside in the Don Gaspar historic district. It resides in downtown east side. So that is where the contribution to the downtown east side historic district can be, we saw that as a little problematic. Let's go to the next slide. So just zooming in, here's the site just off the Paseo, directly west of the state capitol. We have the 4 bungalows there on Don Gaspar, the Concha Ortiz y Pino building, a little bit further west, and then the 2 smaller outbuildings. The next slide. So Heather, we could go ahead and move through these. I think I have all of the same information that let's stop here. Yeah. So this is the concept site plan for the proposed executive office building. We have our entrance into the subterranean parking garage off of Galisteo Street on the west side of the building. The north side of the building is the grand entry. And then also really trying to open up a pedestrian experience across the street from the Capitol and on the east side of the building along Don Gaspar in order to ensure, plenty of light and fenestrations and fresh air for the interior offices. We have these 2 interior courtyards that the building kind of wraps around. And then of course we have the parking garage that kind of serves to enclose those interior courtyards to the south. And the goal here is to create really good pedestrian connectivity with the Baton building across the street, as well as with the Capitol to the east. The next slide. So this is the view kind of looking to the southwest, I believe. And that's the north facade of the primary north facade of the building along South Capitol. So as you can see, we're really drawing inspiration, from the Baton building for sure. And those territorial elements, which have really come to define the Capitol campus. We really wanted to maintain a good design consistency there. This does have a few more sort of, contemporary elements, but we feel is very consistent with the pattern that is developed in the campus over many decades. So this is just kind of zooming in on the entry with the big portal pergola element there and the tower element that kind of, again, speaks to the Baton building. And then this is the Don Gaspar facade. We have kind of a open portal for the pedestrian access there. And as part of the design effort, and we'll be able to dig down into this deeper when we get into the design process, is what is our effort to memorialize the bungalows or the casitas, as we refer to them. And then we're really exploring a lot of options to do that. And the design team is working on that as we speak, frankly, because we really charge them as you know, they have not been let loose on the design yet because we need to get through this process first. But looking at where those ideas and opportunities to get creative in ways that we can memorialize, you know, what was there previously. Next slide. And then this is the Galisteo facade. You can see the entrance to the subterranean parking garage to the right. And then really stepping back the massing and, you know, in terms of how those facades relate to the street, we think is an important element, providing nice outdoor space opportunities for the employees as they, who will be, you know, residing and working in the building. Those are some of the you know, important goals of the design. And then that's just the flat elevation of the South Capitol, of the north elevation along South Capitol. And then we have Don Gaspar. And then we have Galisteo. So this is, so as I mentioned, this is a concept, again, to understand how this building is going to relate to its environment. What are the appropriate elements for the kind of the skin of this building? And we present that to you this evening to inform that discussion regarding the reestablishment of streetscape. So this is just listing the buildings themselves and their approximate age of construction and their historic status that was established. And so I'm not going to run through that, but I'm just going to tell you which page just to jump to, Heather, just so you don't have to scroll through all this. Just 1 second. Why don't you jump to page 42 of the PDF? Great, thank you. So as is required for any demolition request, as I think you all know, is that the city's building official, who is currently Bobby Padilla, has to inspect the structure and report on his findings in terms of the status and state of the structure. So this was initially done in November of 2022. And Mr. Padilla states, and I'll just quote from this, and this is in your packet. But it says and this is similar for all 6 buildings. The condition of the existing structures are in poor condition and would be extremely difficult to achieve compliance with energy conservation code due to the type of material that the walls are constructed with in consideration of the age of the components, and in the structure would need extensive work to comply with electrical and plumbing codes in order to provide safe and sound structure. As building official, my recommendation is to demo buildings. So this is pretty consistent with his findings for all 6 buildings. And one thing I think it's really important to make a distinction. When we talk about minimum maintenance requirements, and we by no means concede that the state has not kept up with minimum maintenance. Those buildings are being occupied. They are being retrofitted and used to the best of the ability as office space for state agencies. We do not concede that. But minimum maintenance does not mean you have to bring the building up to accessibility standards, current electrical standards, current plumbing standards. That's not what minimum maintenance means. There's nothing in the code that requires that as part of minimum maintenance. Minimum maintenance is about ensuring the buildings remain erect, plaster is taken care of, and that the minimum kind of structural maintenance is done so the buildings don't literally fall down. That is really the goal. And there's an aesthetic goal about the exterior of an historic building and historic district to maintain some exterior components of the building. But I think it's very important to make that distinction. The state of New Mexico has put hundreds of thousands of dollars into these buildings over the decades in order to make them somehow functional as commercial office space when they were built as residences in the 1930s. Not really been the most fiscally responsible approach for the state of New Mexico. So in November of 22, Bobby was recommending demolition, and then there was updated reports from December of 23, just a few months ago, where makes the same comments about it would be really difficult and extensive in order to bring, like with the casitas, these pentile buildings up to current code and current standards. But yet the recommendation for demolition is deleted. It's a little concerning that we had a report from Mr. Padilla when nothing has changed with these buildings in the year between the first report and the second report, except a new report was generated and included in the packet. So it is important to, this is not your typical case. And I think we all recognize that. We're under a unique set of rules. We have a unique applicant with very unique needs. And the state of New Mexico has significant space requirements. And they're trying to approach this in the most fiscally responsible way with taxpayer dollars. This is not a residential neighborhood anymore. It hasn't been a residential neighborhood for decades. So we are here tonight respectfully requesting approval, the opportunity to remove these structures and replace it with a thoughtfully designed facility to serve the needs of the state of New Mexico and its constituents. And with that, I'll be happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very thorough report. Jennifer, you indicated that you did want to memorialize the bungalows. Your present conceptual design does not do that, correct?
We do have it actually. One of the initial ideas was doing something with the pavement pattern along Don Gaspar, and that is reflected. And that was just kind of an initial, again, an initial concept, but it's something we continue to explore to see, is that really the best way to do that? I think it shows in the site plan, Heather. There. Yeah, you can sort of see it on the right. And but yeah, so doing something unique with the pavement pattern that really, you know, exactly the footprint of where those buildings were located. That is one of the ideas that is kind of in the mix right now, but it is not our final, where we're gonna, I don't know if that's where we're gonna finally land on it. And we're very interested in the feedback from the board and the committee about what are some other ways that could be accomplished that would be meaningful.
And did you indicate in your presentation that the bungalows are or are not being occupied? They are not being used? They are.
Yes.
And so is the Concha Ortiz Pino building.
Correct.
Board members, other questions, comments before we hear from the public? Member Benjamin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. These are just comments, and the only reason I'm making them at this time is because I know there are people from the public that wish to speak, which is always extremely gratifying. Thank you for coming. I always find it helpful when I'm appearing in court for a judge to tell me what their preliminary thoughts are so that so I have an opportunity to address them. So I thought, I have no idea where the board is going tonight, but I have some thoughts of my own preliminarily, and by stating them, it allows an opportunity for members of the public, if they so desire, to tailor some of their comments towards them. So the way I see this project at this time, and my thinking has evolved since the last time we were all together, status review, is that this is really coming before us with a very unique set of procedures. And they're extremely important because, as we all know, in the past, the state has always taken the position that they're not bound by our historic ordinance. And we have some really problematic buildings in Santa Fe because of that. And thanks to the good work of some of the people in this room and others, the state and the city reached an agreement on how to handle that, where the state did agree that it would fall to some extent under the historic ordinance of Santa Fe and other municipalities, recognizing how important it is to help protect and preserve New Mexico's heritage. And I think specifically with reference to Santa Fe, because the state has such a large presence in this city and can have such an impact on it. And that procedure is a little bit different than a normal application process. The states agreed to follow, to some extent, our procedures, but the city has also made some agreements in order to reach an accommodation with the state to allow for them to feel comfortable coming in under our ordinance. And really what that process requires, the way I read it, is a good faith collaboration. And that's a little bit different than just what we normally do in a quasi judicial process of applying the ordinance to the facts. Here we do have to engage in a good faith collaboration, and specifically the city has bound itself in its ordinance to consider in that process some additional factors, such as the state's needs for cost effectiveness in their procedure, in their proposals, as well as functionality. And that makes perfect sense. If they're going to agree to abide by our design standards, they also want to be sure that they can accomplish their own purposes at the same time. So I think that's just an important consideration in my mind in reviewing both the demolition request and ultimately when we're looking at a new project proposal. The other thing that I think is extremely important in this case is recognizing that it comes before us in the context of what we all recognize, even though it's not anywhere in our ordinance, as a specific campus or complex. And it's not just a complex, it's the state government complex. Santa Fe fought very, very hard in 1900 to keep the capital. Once we transitioned from a territorial government to the state government in Santa Fe, and shocked Albuquerque by succeeding in that. And it's a huge benefit to Santa Fe to have the state capitol complex in our city. It's a great benefit. And I think that the capitol complex has to be taken into account as the setting for everything that we're considering. And when we do that, what do you think of with the state government? Of course, you think of a certain amount of monumentality and grandeur and importance. And you don't normally think of residential bungalows. So, I think for me, taking it in that context, even if the bungalows, for example, getting ahead of myself here, they do have importance, but we have to keep in mind, are they important within the context of this particular district, this particular streetscape? And I don't necessarily equate historic importance with contributing status. There's a spectrum there. And what we're to consider in a demolition criteria, one of our criteria is just the historic importance of the building. When we consider whether it should be status as contributing, we're considering its age and whether it contributes or helps maintain the character of a district. That doesn't necessarily make it of high importance. And so I think we need to differentiate between whether something is contributing in that sense of our ordinance and whether it is still of significant, how much historic significance that structure has. So you can tell where I'm heading with this. I'm thinking that at this point in time that the casitas, they have been orphaned in this particular location. They don't seem to have much to do with the Capitol complex. I don't particularly see a strong need for retaining them if they can be replaced with something that would be fitting for the area. The Concho Ortiz Epino building is a little bit more difficult, but I think it, the irony there, it doesn't escape me that it's somewhat ironic that we never would have allowed that building to have been built if we had had any say so over it. The state did that in the face of our ordinance, which specifically prohibited that design. And it would be ironic if now we prohibit the state from replacing it with a design that actually does conform to our ordinance. I also want to take into consideration the cost and functionality, because that's part of the criteria for demolition. It's quite apparent from the documents that were submitted to us that it would be enormously expensive to be able to renovate these buildings, to make them even marginally functional, and they still would not provide the level of functionality that the state indicates it needs. So there we go. Then we come to design. The design conceptually does meet our general standards. I think it needs to be changed. I think the applicant is indicating it needs to be continued to be tweaked. But I think generally speaking, something of that monumentality is perfectly appropriate in that setting, especially as compared to the frankly extremely unattractive hodgepodge of buildings that exists on that block right now, right in front of our state capitol. So the way I would be thinking, subject to further comment from the public and board members, is that the ideal solution here would be a contingent approval of demolition, subject to the city being able to reach an agreement with the state on a final design that was acceptable to the city. And if that agreement can't be reached, then the demolition approval would be no longer in effect, and we'd be back to square one. So I'm just giving general thoughts right now. If someone wants to respond to those, I'm more than happy. I would love to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I think that the public is going to have a lot of input in reference to this particular project. And right now it looks like Member Guida has something to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Member Benvenu, for those comments. I think it's a great way to kind of frame a conversation with the public tonight. I'll try not to hit any of those same points again. I agree with most, if not all of them. There's been a great deal of kind of back and forth in this board about the kind of, is there a design presentation? Is there not? How can we consider the demolition without a design? And I guess, some of this is semantics. Some of this is unique to the state process, but I think what's not unique is when this board considers a demolition request, that it does help to provide not the final design, not the final construction design, but this kind of pre-design or conceptual design in an informational setting. We saw this with the O'Keeffe Museum so that we understood early on and got board feedback about what the eventual intent for the property was. And that enabled us to make informed decisions about the demolition requests that followed. There were a few hiccups along the way, but for the most part, that process of informing intent is something that was helpful to the subsequent actions of this board. It is also characteristic of preservation process that occurs at any other level, particularly at the state, where we do understand what a project proposal is and understand its potential adverse effects up front, and not the opposite, not the opposite of let's pretend that there is no design and let's analyze the demolition request in a vacuum. That process was followed earlier by this board, at least with the casitas, and led to a kind of catastrophe scenario. We didn't understand what the building would look like. The board statused these casitas defensively, and staff agreed that they were significant and not even contributing. We've reduced that status. I think that's the wrong way to go about things. And I'll add too that even though there's a unique process here with the collaboration with the city and the state, which is unique to state's authority and the kind of downhill way that preservation works to municipalities, you know, there is still inherent in those rules the idea that we do look at adverse effects. So like embedded in the kind of block front and reestablishment of the streetscape criteria here, that idea is anticipated, that we would see design along with, or pre-design along with a demolition request. And I really commend the state for the amount. I know it's just a conceptual design. It looks quite far along, I know, but it's just, we're looking at exteriors. And I really commend the state for presenting this information, this preliminary information tonight, and participating in a good back and forth with this board and with the city of Santa Fe. It's very, very helpful. I'll add that, you know, on top of Member Benvenue's comments, that, you know, that not only is this something that you know, looks better than what's there, and it is in keeping with the Capitol complex in terms of scale, in terms of design language, in terms of the relationships of one building to another and making a district. I think what we see from the site plan and from particularly the way that the landscape at the northeast corner and the two facades on the north and the east, the way they really kind of address the pedestrian environment, the way that they're welcoming. I think we're very fortunate as a city to not have a Capitol complex that's up on a hill and away. This is something that is embedded within the fabric of our downtown environment. You know, our lawmakers are not being whisked away in armored cars and tunnels and all of that. These are folks who come out on the street, and this building, at least in this preliminary guise, really does speak to that. It certainly shows what the functional, or projects what the functional needs are of the state offices, well beyond the square footage and the tiny buildings that we see there now. So there's that practical consideration as well. I think that's all I have for now, but you know, I think this issue of block front really is going to become a kind of key issue for me. I don't know that there is an existing block front that we have to worry about, but we'll get into that.
Member Guida, for your comments, and other members wish to comment this at this time? Or do we want to hear from the public? Yes, Member Bicha.
I can just make a couple of comments. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I can see sort of both sides of this discussion. One point of view being, you know, the Roundhouse and the surrounding existing Capitol complex buildings have already done a pretty good job of demolishing the residential area that used to be here. Only some parts remain, and these, you know, former 4 homes are really all that's left as a little reminder of what was as a continuation of the Don Gaspar streetscape. And we, you know, there's a tendency to want to preserve those. And I agree with that. They are special. And in terms of the Conte Ortiz y Pino building, that one is named for someone who's important to our history. And I think the building has some importance to the public as well. The other point of view being that these buildings do now stand out as anomalies in the Capitol complex. They stand out as poorly maintained. They stand out in terms of size, and they don't convey their functionality, their current functionality, with the small garages behind them, and their size and presentation to the street as as houses rather than office buildings. So I guess I'm eager for the public to comment and sort of further the discussion that was initiated by the applicant in the early meeting. And I hope that, you know, to Member Bienvenue's point and Member Guida's as well, the collaboration can reach some sort of common ground that sort of satisfies both points of views and honors and respects the opinions of the invested, you know, extremely vested public who, you know, sort of graciously house the state complex, you know, right in the heart of where many people grew up.
Thank you for those comments, Member Beachside. If there are no other comments by members of the board, I will entertain public comment. What I would suggest is that anyone that is wishing to speak in reference to this project, if you have not been sworn in, would you stand where right here on near the podium and get sworn in? You can get sworn in mass.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and swear whoever's going to speak. So please raise your right hands if you haven't been sworn. Thank you, thank you. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. When you approach the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Evening, Chair Rios, board members, good to see you all. My name is Frank Katz. I live at 1300 Canyon Road, Santa Fe. I'll be brief. I have talked to you about this project before. I'm sure my words are etched on your memory. The issue to me here is, can the demo be decided before we have a plan? And I don't know what the answer to the reestablishment of the street section is, but how can we decide that if we don't get that first process of the planning, that cooperative process done? And there are two issues, there are two parts to whether the structure is essential for the street and whether it will be reestablished. And we don't know whether it will be reestablished, and we won't know until there is a design. And Jennifer's been really clear that they're not doing the design. They're not hired for the design. We have no idea whether what we've seen is part of it. So we need the proposed structure. And that whole process that goes on, of course, is that under procedure, before the design phase, that's when there is this consultation process where board members and members of the public, probably H board, probably architects and such, sit down together and they try to work through what the design will be. Would it be done in a way that would leave these buildings? Would that be a good idea? I don't know what the answer to that is at this point. But the point is that comes before the decision of, does it reestablish the streetscape? In the 2023 hearing on status, Member Guida favored a downgrade. He thought that the historic designations were based on the fear of development. And I think he's correct about that fear. And I think the way we resolve that is to have the discussion about the design, the cooperative process. Then it comes back with a proposed design, and then there is the hearing, the public hearing, and the discussion. I think I'm supposed to shut up now. Thank you.
Frank,
Yes.
so you are indicating that the state should come with a final design
With what they're proposing.
prior to considering demolition.
Absolutely. That's absolutely the case. I would hope that you would, well, it's sort of what Member Bienvenue said is, well, you know, we won't not consider design. We're not frozen in it, but we need to know what the reestablishment of the streetscape, what you're proposing there to see whether it'll work. And that's the way I think it ought to be done. I think you all should deny the motion to demolish now, saying, no, it's too soon. Let's have the collaborative process with the subcommittee and other members of the public and have them work out what can be done, what should be done. Maybe that they decide, you know, we can't really do it with these buildings. It may be that they decide a way to include the buildings. I don't know. You know, I don't make it, but that's the process. The state recognizes the importance of the historic area and so gives the city enormous power to try to protect its historic basis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Herbert Lotz. I live at 353 East Alameda. And I was not planning on sharing anything other than in observing what the projected construction of the new building might be. I agree very much with what Mr. Katz had to say about let's come up with a design before we start the demolition. And I think the design is a little bit more complex than it needs to be. I love the idea of keeping things simple. And one of the things that I've seen in Santa Fe is that that seems to be diminishing. And the more complex things become, I think I particularly don't like it. I love that we have a contemporary museum called the Vlada Museum. However, I disagree with every wall being a different color and surface in a historic part of our city. And I would hate to see the same thing happen with this building in our state capitol. Let's keep the Capitol building the primary thing that we see here and not the surrounding buildings. And I realize that architects and designers and artists, they want to do something that respects their talents. But I think in a situation like this, keep it simple, stupid. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Nicoletta Monroe, 701 Dunlap. Thank you for considering this proposal. And I noticed that no one's mentioned the main thesis in the packet, which is that the buildings represent a timeline of architecture. We have not mentioned that in our discussion. And I appreciate that everyone has certainly read their packet, so they would certainly be familiar with the discussion concept that I'm stating. So the casitas represent a point in time. So does the Concha y Ortiz building. And in proposing to demolish them, you take away from the Capitol complex a very valuable characteristic, which is that there are buildings there representing different periods of time, and they don't match, and they're not intended to match. I want to remind you that at one time, the town of Santa Fe proposed to demolish the palace, and arguments had to be created to stop them. That is why we developed the old Santa Fe Association and other preservation associations, foundations to preserve buildings. The statement that the applicant is giving us that they need space. Has anyone seen a report that we need space? And if we do need space, I'd like to see that written in a report. I'd like an inventory of the entire square footage of offices that are located here in Santa Fe, and I'd like to hear what they need. How many square feet do they need? Could we rebuild the Concha y Ortiz building to accommodate them? Could we somehow avoid this giant building that they want to build? Because I don't think it will fit in with the Capitol at all. I'd also like to say that if the state of New Mexico wants to build, why don't they rebuild the College of Santa Fe and build a UNM building there in Midtown so that people can attend college? They're so interested in construction. Why don't you rebuild there?
Thank you.
Board members, my name is Mark Bertram and I'm a 43-year commercial real estate developer, and I'm normally pro-development. But this proposed, oh, I'm sorry. Let's go. But this proposed building project is so egregious in a few different ways, I feel the need to share my thoughts. This project's been on the drawing boards, as you heard tonight, for about 10 or 12 years. Earlier iterations of it were a pretty modest 56,000 square foot building. Now it's almost 4 times that size. I've been involved in several projects that have had to be reviewed by this very body. And in every case, the development of those projects would have been much easier, faster, and more profitable if we could just ignored the historic district's regulation, torn down the buildings we didn't want to make for a more developable site. The whole purpose of this district is to preserve our historic fabric, even though it does create a burden on developers in some cases. The state of New Mexico is the developer in this case. I'm also outraged as a taxpayer at the cost of this building. I mean, I own hundreds of thousands of square feet of office space in both Santa Fe and Albuquerque. You can have any one of the buildings I own for half of what the price per square foot we are going to spend, all of us as taxpayers, on this building. Nearly $1,000 a square foot. Also believe the size of it's completely out of scale with the existing streetscape and surrounding neighborhoods. It's roughly the size of the current Capitol. And with its parking garage, we'll add 700 vehicle trips at a minimum per day to an area whose infrastructure wasn't designed for that amount of additional traffic. I'm also concerned as a real estate broker about the impact to the general office market in Santa Fe. The last time there was a large building like this was when the Thornburg campus moved out of downtown Santa Fe. When they moved out of downtown, they vacated about 60 or 70,000 square feet of space, and it's taken nearly 15 years to recover from that. I think the state should have to follow the same rules as the private sector. And I will end it there and thank you very much. I urge you to listen to your staff and their recommendations and deny the demolition of these structures. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Tom Spray, 444 Galisteo, right across the street from all this activity. Good to see you all again. We were here just a few months ago having this conversation. I want to point out again, of course, what happened 12 years ago. I was proud to be the president of the Old Santa Fe Association at that time when the state came forth with another plan for another building at that time. So now we have, once again, the Great White Whale, also now known as the Executive Office Building, being proposed for that site. And at that time in 2012, we said at the Old Santa Fe Association, we are not opposed to an executive office building on that site. We are not opposed. So we had prepared at that time renderings of a proposed 60,000 square foot facility to be built on the campus, on the vacant area which is still vacant right now, right in that space. Put the projection right on that screen right up there. And all of you at that time voted in favor of this process of being able to say, we're going to keep these as historic and we want to deny what your request is. So Jennifer had mentioned it's complex, and it is. But your part tonight is very simple. All you have to do is reiterate what you've said before, that these are historic and these are appropriate, and to deny the request at this time as the staff has recommended to you. Do that. We can move this process forward in a collaborative way that we have discussed and you've heard discussed already tonight, and the other speakers behind me, I'm sure, will also say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Adam Fulton Johnson, 121 Arroyo Hondo Trail, 87508. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm the executive director of the Old Santa Fe Association. I want to thank you for the sort of preliminary feedback that was given by Member Bienvenu, Member Guida, and Member Beachide. I'm against provisional approval of this project for the reason that the collaborative process that is outlined that would, if we provisionally approve demolition of all these sites, then we have agreed to demolish them, and the sort of, we're putting the cart before the horse as far as the design committee goes. I had a conversation with Senator Peter Worth in advance with Anna Silva, who's present here, of his op-ed, which was released on Sunday, which really celebrates this collaborative process that we have in front of us. We worked on it, as Tom Spray said, for the garage on the Paseo. And we have an opportunity again to work collaboratively as the state, as the city, and as stakeholders like the Old Santa Fe Association, like Friends of Architecture, like the AIA, to design something for this site that really fits it and is a community input. So I agree with the staff recommendation for the denial of the demolition requests for the majority of the sites, save the motor pool and the sort of auxiliary buildings. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Adam.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Randall Bell. I'm president of the Old Santa Fe Association. Thank you for hearing from the public on this. I think it's important to just reiterate what has been mentioned over and over. There is a collaborative process. There seems to be this tacit impression from the city and the developers the state's development representatives that the city and the development parties are working together, and that's the collaboration. The collaboration required under the state statute involves other parties, other stakeholders, Old Santa Fe Association among them, and that has not happened at all. And there was this informational hearing that Ms. Jenkins and Deputy Secretary Silva had in, I believe it was January, correct? There was very good participation from the public there, different stakeholders. There were a lot of comments, many of them criticizing the scale, which is extreme. I actually asked the question of the Deputy Secretary, how did you get such a massive structure? It appears to basically fill the entire lot line. And she said, well, that isn't really what we, and I'm paraphrasing, that isn't really the direction we gave them. It's just that this is our lot. And we told them we wanted to get a rendering of what the maximum we could build there. Okay. So there are facts, as they say in court, facts not in evidence, that the proponents are asking this body to accept that, number one, there's this desperate need for that grossly overbuilt building. And number two, that it's fiscally responsible to do that. Now, none of us have those facts, and I would like to see the underlying evidence that they are using to try to justify this. It's premature. There is a process for collaborative meetings on this to try to develop an actual real proposed design. And they have failed to follow that procedure. So please deny the application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
I live at 820 Don Quixote Avenue, just around the corner from the proposed site. Alicia Bertram. I hope that you all vote to deny this to go forward. I also bought a house that was built in the 30s with pentile, with electrical problems, with plumbing issues. And other private citizens are not granted the same rules that the state is trying to skip. I think that this block of Don Cubero is extremely important to the fabric of that neighborhood. And not to mention the proposed building is far larger than anything around except for the state capitol itself. This will drive 700 to 1,000 new people into that neighborhood a day. And I don't think that they're taking into account Wood Gormley, which is an elementary school just up the street with children, young children walking home from school every day. I don't think they're taking into account a lot of these living and breathing neighborhoods that surround it just across the street. And a lot of those people, unfortunately, have kids, have jobs, are unable to come to these 3-4 hour meetings to speak out in opposition. But I would tell you, we have a lot of friends and a lot of young people in the neighborhood, and they are extremely against this proposed project. The other thing that I worry about is if you bend the rules of historic status for the state, other people will find that those rules no longer apply to them either. You'll have people start altering historic structures without permission on weekends, at night, because they no longer find that this historic board is doing what they are supposed to do, which is to preserve historic buildings in downtown Santa Fe. And so I hope you deny it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Francesca Bonci, 1030 West Houghton Street. I was on the agenda for tonight, but you postponed me. Okay. Anyway, I came here 2 years ago from Long Island, New York. Who's been here? Who's ever been on Long Island, New York? Nobody? Okay. 3 million people live in Long Island, New York. When I saw that picture put up, I just felt I was back in Mineola, Long Island, the seat of county government, wall to wall office buildings for government. That's great. Half of them are empty. Do you really need 56,000 square feet to house government employees? And where are those government employees being housed now? They're all going to move out of those buildings into this new one? What's going to happen with those empty buildings? I'm not saying you deny it. I'm not saying you accept it. And I understand developers, they ask for the moon and then they go negotiate down from that. This is the moon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
79 Hillside Avenue, Santa Fe, New Mexico. In my 79 years of living here in Santa Fe in the downtown historic district, I have seen the expansion of the Capitol from the PERA building all the way to where we're at now. Where is it going to stop? You know, we've lost a major part of the historic part of Santa Fe down through the years in every direction from the state capitol. And if we allow this to happen, are we going to cross Paseo de Peralta into the Don Gasper area neighborhoods, or in either direction, or go up on the east side and take the area where Orchard Drive is up to Gerald Peters Gallery? I mean, it doesn't stop. And I think as I'm glad I'm as old as I am, because I don't think I'll be around long enough to see this thing built anyway. But we need to figure out some point of not allowing the state to do these things. We as citizens have the right and the privilege to express what we want. And down through the years, I mean, when the PRA building was built, my great-grandfather's gravesite was disturbed right there. And then from there on, St. Mike's building. And it's really amazing their mentality. They need more and more space. And like it was said a while ago, how many buildings are empty around town? And there needs to be a survey done. Do we really need this building? Thank you.
My name is John Eddy. I was previous source. Madam Chair, board members, I really appreciate everything that's been said to date. Well, right now, I really appreciate Ms. Bertram's words. And the elephant in the room here is that the state has been practicing demolition by neglect for decades in this area. They have always planned to build out this area with complete disregard to these. I do not call them casitas, I call them bungalows or homes. These homes were connected to Santa Fe people doing business on the plaza. It was a transitional area, and these homes, these people lived in until they did better economically, and then they moved deeper into the South Capitol, and they built more exciting homes for them. But this is history. These 4 buildings are not really just an island, but in the words of architects, when you drive up that street, these buildings are speaking to the Capitol. They are the last buildings on Vargas Street that still speak to the Capitol. I urge you to deny the majority of this request. The Fleet building, the motor pool, I can see that this would be an easy slam dunk. Let these people move forward. But they have not been in good faith with us. They have not come to this meeting showing us any indication that they can design around these buildings, should they have to. So we need to move forward. We need to stop this in this track and get them to the negotiating table so that we can come up with a creative design which maintains these historic homes, because they're the last part of the fabric of history on that block. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Anyone else in this room wishing to speak? Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios. We have Ms. Beninato. Stephanie, you will have to be sworn. Please state your name and address. I don't believe you've been sworn.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, but I already was sworn actually.
Oh, you
before.
were, sorry about
Yeah.
that.
That's okay. I agree with many of the speakers before. I think that we really need to see an actual plan and to engage in the collaborative process. I can imagine that there are ways to incorporate those bungalows into the larger complex as a sort of a entry or transitional way. And although I do love the Concha Ortiz y Pino building, not that it really fits in, but I also I think that too could be incorporated. I certainly would not be opposed to demolishing the other 2 structures. And I do think that just even giving the state conditional approval is sort of rewarding them for demolition by neglect. And really, that has not been talked about very much. And again, I think this is part of the history. I know people who live there. So they were used rather recently for residential. And I also used them as an office space when I worked during session at the state capitol. So I have acquaintances with those buildings. And again, I think they should try to be incorporated into a design and not just show us this big shiny office building that overwhelms and I think probably detracts to some extent from the Capitol itself. And I agree with other speakers about justifying the need for such a large complex, even if you want to grow into it to some extent. But look at the streets and look at the capacity for traffic there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no.
Thank you very much. I guess that in reflecting everyone's feelings this evening and board members, I feel that the building should not be demolished, excuse me, should not be demolished. There is a reason that we preserve our buildings. And the reason for that is that all our buildings that we preserve tell us a story. They are a reflection of time and place. They perhaps these buildings are rather simplistic, but they are simplistic for a reason because they were part of a neighborhood and they were there before the Capitol buildings were there. So in my view, I think that those buildings could be incorporated into the a complex of the Capitol complex. I think that if you are an architect that is worth your salt, that you could incorporate these buildings into a workable complex that would be beneficial to those people that are going to occupy the building. And I can understand why you want the development of this complex to take place. I heard I was listening very much to Member Beachside's comments, and she was expressing kind of both sides. And when you're on this board, and I am not a voting member of this board because I'm the chair, I only vote in case of a tie, but I can make my voice known. And I think that and especially in this community, think of the buildings that we have here that were they not, if they were not preserved, they would not be here. Okay, including the cathedral. The cathedral is not a Pueblo Revival building, but we definitely try to preserve it for everything that it stands for. The Palace of the Governors. It didn't start off like that. It was a more simplistic building and it evolved to what it is now, but it didn't become a huge, enormous building. It is a building that we still honor right in our plaza. So I think that these buildings could be incorporated into a bigger complex, but that I don't know if I would say incorporated. They should be honored and stand on their own merits. That's what they should do. Not, when I say incorporated, I almost feel like you're going to drown these buildings into something that's going to be attached to them. And that's not, in my way of thinking, that's not what should be done. So I think that keeping these buildings, it's part of our legacy. They represent what was there in the past. And I think it's easier to demolish the buildings and put something new in there. Oftentimes, here on the board, when we are evaluating projects, that we have many times seen buildings that many people would want to demolish, but that have historic significance that we do not allow to be demolished. And then those buildings become gems, really, because they are reflecting a time and place. They're reflecting something that is important, maybe the people that lived in the buildings, and they can be refurbished to a condition where people can use them appropriately. Member Aguilar Madrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? I feel like my mic's a little low tonight. I want to thank everyone, all the members from the public that came out tonight. I know being out 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night is hard for everyone who works, but hearing your feedback is really helpful. And so I just want to say thank you for that. At this time, I don't think I would feel comfortable approving demolition of these buildings. Prior to my time as a landscape architect, I worked as a planner for the public schools, and any time a school was reaching or felt like they were reaching capacity, we would go through a really thorough utilization analysis and look at every nook and cranny of that school to see if they were using it as efficiently as possible, everything from furniture layout to closets. I mean, we really analyze those spaces because that was taxpayer money that potentially was going to be put towards a new facility. So we wanted to make sure that the existing facility was being used appropriately. I would assume and hope that the state has gone through this analysis of their office spaces in Santa Fe, but unfortunately, we didn't see any of that in this packet. So I wouldn't be comfortable approving the demolition of some of our contributing buildings without seeing some of that analysis done. I also wish that, rather than this pretty thorough study of what the street facades of this building would look like, I think it would have been more helpful to do a massing study where it looked at some, some different scenarios were looked at where, okay, if we kept all of the bungalows and the Concho Ortiz building, what could we do with that leftover square footage, and how many office spaces could we accommodate? And then having that analysis of how many office spaces do we need, then I think the state could start to build an argument of what kind of space is actually needed rather than filling the entire block. And then my last comments, because I want to keep it pretty short, I know it's late, but if the bungalows, let's say, were to be approved to be demolished, I think there's a really massive opportunity missed with the design that's shown tonight. The state capitol has this very strong pedestrian access, and this block isn't responding to that at all. And I think that's an opportunity to create a really nice pedestrian space that connects the two blocks if the bungalows were to be demolished, rather than the pedestrian space that's proposed right now that just sits next to the parking lot. So depending on which way this board goes tonight, it might be something to be considered in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Aguilar Patrano. Any other members wishing to make any more comments? Member Guida.
Just a few comments, Madam Chair. Thank you. And hopefully some direction for a decision. Preservation in Santa Fe, is most specifically pointed at the historic districts that were identified in the 1980s, and the kind of inflection of our styles ordinance has addressed preservation. That preservation effort is not based necessarily on individual buildings. All buildings are a record of a place in time. All cars are a recognition of a place in time. There are contributing features. There are statements and periods of significance that are associated with districts and with individual buildings sometimes that are in those districts. But predominantly in Santa Fe, we are talking about a district-wide preservation effort. And so that is, to me, is the kind of primary consideration. That's when we consider whether a building is, that's why we talk about contributing status. That's why we talk about harmony. That's why we talk about streetscape. And you could make the argument that that preservation instinct kind of pushes back to the 1912 plan of Santa Fe, which had some provisions in it for maintaining the ancient streets, the character of the city. not necessarily individual buildings. I think that's an important distinction to make. This is not archaeology. Not everything under the old outhouse is worth saving, is necessary to save. We have a living city. We have a growing city. The efforts since 1912 have always been about newness and growth. We have to balance, yes, tourism, yes, economic development, but we have to develop community functionality and livability against our preservation concerns. And I think that beyond that, the specific legislation that's involved with dealing with the state does, to Member Benvenue's point, speak to functionality and economics. And I think that any argument for preserving these very marginal examples of historic buildings has to be balanced against that, against their the functional argument for making them into office space, and against the economic development, and against their relative importance and contribution to our downtown and east side historic district, because that's what we're talking about here. I just don't see it. The second point that I'll make really is about process, and I really do want to dispel this notion that we are not going through the prescribed process. Yes, there are additional rules associated with state capital outlay process here. There's a design, as the applicant laid out, there's a kind of design, demolition consideration and a design consideration. We identified that a condition of demolition is this consideration of block front or streetscape. There were comments tonight about whether, we haven't seen the final design. I mean, just a few weeks ago, we were having the argument that, we shouldn't be looking at design at all. I really want to arrive at a reasonable place here about this discussion of what demolition should be considered against. The applicants have provided a planning, have gone through a long period of planning, have gone through a pre-design phase, and have presented us a very developed concept design tonight. That is what is being considered in light of these demolition. Is it reasonable to expect that we workshop designs to the nth degree, that we're shown every option in front of this board? Absolutely not. That is not, it's not realistic. The applicant is clearly engaged in a in-depth planning and design pre-design process that has yielded what we saw tonight. And we have moved forward with demolition requests in other cases where similar information has been presented. So I don't feel like we're circumventing a process. There's also been the assertion that this needs to be a collaboration with members of the community. I agree with that in concept. This is a citizens board. This board represents the community here. There is the requirement in the pre-design phase of a project proposal that the applicant do outreach and get feedback from members of the community. They are doing that tonight. That is not the requirement that the applicant design the project with those members of the community and those organizations. We have a public forum here tonight. Everybody is invited to give public comment. This board is provided to give public comment. We are at the pre-design phase and the consideration of demolition. This public comment is ongoing. There are subsequent phases identified in the capital outlay process that deal with, once we move past the kind of pre-design phase and we move into design, but before we go out to bid, there is a presentation to the board, there is feedback, there is more community outreach, there is more community development. It's been made, this assertion has been made again and again that with state projects that they're subject to some kind of different rule. That is only if we disagree on the demolition or on the, or if there are unresolved issues at the end of the design process after 60 days. That is something that I feel that we do not want to trigger. That is not a process that is stacked in the favor of the city. That is a special board that is made up of members of the community, members of the H board, and members of the state. And the members of the state outnumber those community members on that board. It would be a bad choice and reflect poorly on our community preservation and design process in this city for the city to argue for that path, either on the demolition front or on the design front. The state, like other applicants, is participating in a public design process and getting feedback. My hope would be that the applicant has heard the responses that have been made from this board and from members of the public leading up to this meeting, in tonight's meeting, in future meetings, so that we can talk about, you know, how is the important aspects of the old historic fabric addressed in the new design? How is the streetscape and the sense of the pedestrian environment reflected? How is the sustainability level of this building addressed? How, you know, how much parking is reasonable to provide in the 21st century when we know there's going to be a change in transportation and emissions and all of that stuff? Those are things that we can continue to talk about with the applicant in this room. But I don't know that we need to kind of trigger some nuclear option that is not going to be a winning outcome for the city, especially when, in my view, the applicant has shown good faith in presenting their design intention and working to get feedback. Lastly, you know, this is going to come down to 3 factors on the demolition tonight. I think we should make a decision on demolition. I think the key factors are these buildings historic. We know that 5 of them are, and that they're marginal. This issue of the block front, I would argue, you could argue this both ways. You know, is this a unique block front? And does it get reestablished by the new design? If it is, there is a proposal on the table for the reestablishment of not only a block front, but a much better public face on 3 sides, which we don't even have now. So, I mean, you could argue it that way. On the opposite side is, you know, is there a unique and valuable block front that's being established by the existing buildings? I would say no. The casitas don't contribute to a context. That context does not exist anymore. It's the Capitol complex now. That's because of decisions that this community and this board have made in the past. The Concha Ortiz building is an island in a sea of parking. To talk about a block front or a street front, I think is a bit silly. And then lastly, and probably the kind of thorniest issue is the condition of these structures. I've read Bobby Padilla's letter. I think it's incredibly vague. You know, I think where these cases are black and white for demolition exceptions are where there is, you know, structural engineer's report, or there's obviously a case where the building is compromised beyond repair. I don't know that, like, per the text of this code, that we can say that like these buildings are irreparable or could not be improved. Would it be expensive? Yes. Is it reasonable to put offices into residential? Practical? No. Is it expensive? Yes. You know, is the Concha Ortiz building outdated and all? Yes, absolutely. Is it impossible to upgrade those buildings? No. But I think for me, the kind of considerations around this lie in the discussion of feasibility, practicality, economics that are embedded within the agreement between the city and the state. We have in our city the state capital. It's not that the state is going to build some suburban campus somewhere else. We're lucky, and so some leeway needs to be made on that front, and perhaps through the kind of feasibility, economic angle that's embedded in this, we can kind of consider that on the condition issue. Sorry, going on so long.
Went way over your 2 minutes, but anybody else wishing to say anything else? Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate all the comments, and I thought they were extremely helpful. If I were to try to organize what I heard, I put them into three categories. One is our general policy issues. That's really about, does the state need this building? Couldn't it be somewhere else? I think those are perfectly valid considerations. I don't think that they're really part of our purview. I think that that's something you want to contact the state and express your opinions on. I just don't really see that that's a role for the H board in considering demolition. We have to assume the state is acting in good faith. And we have no reason to even put that as one of our criteria, I don't believe. So policy issues, as extremely important as they are, and some of which I actually agree with that were expressed tonight, I don't think we're the right forum for that. Another second of the three kind of categories I heard is a general feeling of don't demolish these buildings ever. They are critical to with the preservation of Santa Fe's history. I also respect that opinion. That's exactly why I proposed that we needed to break this process down and consider demolition first before we consider design. Because if the board agrees with that and ultimately the city, well, then that completely changes what we're going to be talking about in the way of design, if at all. And moreover, if that is the position that the board takes, and you know, again, I hear the views of some board members as well as the public, and I think they're certainly well taken, although I don't agree with them with respect to the bungalows or the Controvertisi Pino building. The outcome of that would not end the discussion. The outcome of that would be, first, I suppose the governing body would probably hear that on appeal. And if the demolition was still being denied in a blanket form, that would trigger, if the state so chooses, the committee process to resolve that. And that is favorable to the state, and it's completely out of the city's hands at that stage. That's not an outcome I personally want to see here, is having this whole process thrown over to this committee that's going to be formed that is mainly composed of state officials or state appointees. And I don't think the city would be successful in that committee process on the demolition criteria. And that sort of leads to the third general concern, which was maybe the largest one expressed, which was collaboration, the desire to have a collaborative process. Again, couldn't agree more with that, but that's exactly what we're trying to figure out, is how to have the collaborative process. I think I just fundamentally disagree, even though several attorneys presented it, that the collaboration process applies to the demolition phase. It does not. It applies to the design phase. We don't know how to design the building if we don't know whether the buildings are going to be demolished or not. So there is nothing to collaborate over at this point in time. It makes literally no sense in my mind to even be sitting in a room talking to the state about a collaborative design process unless and until we know whether those buildings at least have the possibility of being demolished. Again, if it's a contingent approval, that means that they have to still be able to satisfy city concerns that we would be happy to that we would allow demolition if and only if the design was acceptable. The final design that was agreed upon, if we reach agreement, would be acceptable to the city. In my mind, that puts all of the power back in the city to be able to work on collaboration. And I think the other two possibilities of the blanket denial of demolition, especially, just completely take the city out of the process. And I just don't think that's a good outcome. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Benvenu. Anything else? Member Beecher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this particular state capital outlay project is different from others that we've heard in the past because it involves a demolition. It's not something we've had to deal with before, and the process has worked without, you know, the future step of going to a committee that's largely state controlled. I do agree with both of your comments about that process. I think that we would lose some ground going there, but as an at-large member, I think part of my role on this board is to amplify the concerns of the public and the stakeholder groups in the preservation community. And I think I understand what I've heard is that if we approve the demolition, that the general feeling is that we preclude the opportunity to provide input in a collaborative process with input from sort of preservation-minded, creative, community members. And so I don't want the public to feel like they have missed that opportunity because of our vote. And I think that there's many well-informed speakers tonight who understand the law and the way this process works, and understand that the preservation community might give up some ground and some control in order to have some input and to be heard in that process. So I hope I've understood that correctly. I do think that we probably will end up in a similar position if we deny the demolition tonight. It can be appealed, and then the governing body will have, if I understand that correctly, the governing body will be able to approve the demolition, and we might end up exactly at that point. But I guess that's a little bit of a risk that I'm hearing that we're willing to take as a community tonight.
Anything else? Nothing further? Interesting discussions. Okay, so we will entertain motions. I will entertain a motion for the first case this evening under this category, which is 2023-007592, 128 South Capitol. This is the motor pool and garage buildings. And do I hear a motion for this? Has to do with demolition, as we all know. These two buildings were determined to be non-contributing, if that helps you in reference to your motion.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Member Aguilar Madonna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll start with easy one, perhaps. On case number 2023-007592 HDRB at 128 South Capitol Street, I move to approve the application as submitted, which aligns with staff's recommendation, which approves the demolition of the non-contributing buildings.
Is there a second?
Each side seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next, we go to case 2023-007593, 130 South Capitol. This is the Concha Ortiz Pino building. This is presently a contributing building. And if you make a motion, there are exceptions in reference to this particular motion which you need to address. Oh. Member Guida.
Make a motion. In case 2023-007593 HDRB 130 South Capitol Street, I move that the board approve demolition, noting that the exception criteria have been met as follows, that the historic status of the building is not a significant consideration factor in light of what's being proposed, that the historic block front or the block front is unique. That does not apply. And lastly, in consideration of the condition of the building, extenuating circumstances of their suitability for state use on an ongoing basis is an extenuating circumstance.
Is there a second to this motion? Member Benveni?
I second, provided a friendly amendment is accepted, that the demolition approval is contingent upon the city and the state reaching agreement through the collaborative process set forth in 14-5.2M and section 3-22-6 for design of a replacement building.
I will accept that as friendly.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
No.
Member Beachside,
No.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next case is 402 Don Gaspar. This is one of the bungalows.
I'll make a
And
motion.
exceptions must be addressed as well. Member Beachside.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2023-007595 HDRB at 402 Don Gaspar Avenue, I move to deny the application for demolition consistent with staff's recommendation that the approval criteria for demolition have not been met.
Aguilar Medrano will second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
No.
Member Guida.
No.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next case is located at 406 Don Gaspar Avenue. This is also one of the bungalows. It's contributing and exceptions are requested, so that has to be addressed.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Case 2023-007596 HDRB 406 Don Gaspar Avenue. I move that the demolition request be approved. Finding that the exception criteria have been met for the same exact reasons as case 2023-007593 HDRB 130 South Capitol. I'll add that the demolition request be contingent upon an approved design for the replacement building.
Is there a second?
I'm trying. And thank you. I will second. I just want to clarify the additional language that it would be that so just consider this a possible friendly amendment, that the approval of demolition is contingent upon the state and the city reaching agreement on a final design of a replacement building pursuant to the state statute and the city ordinance.
Accepted as friendly.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
No.
Member Beachside,
No.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather. Member Mather,
May be muted. Member Mather?
No.
okay, the motion has been denied.
I will entertain a new motion.
I'll make a motion, Madam Chair. In case number 2023-007596 HDRB at 406 Don Gaspar Avenue, I move to deny the application for demolition consistent with staff's recommendation and determination that the criteria have not been met for demolition.
Aguilar Medrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
No.
Member Guida,
No.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We go to 410 Don Gaspar Avenue. Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case 2023-007 597 HDRB at 410 Don Gaspar Avenue, I move to deny the application consistent with staff's recommendation, finding that the exception criteria have not been met.
Each I have a second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Bienvenue,
No.
Member Guida,
No.
Member Mather, Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And the last case is at 414 Don Gaspar. Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2023-007 598 HDRB at 414 Don Gaspar Avenue, I move to deny the application consistent with staff's recommendation, finding that the exception criteria have not been met.
Beachside seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Guida,
No.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
No.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. And thank you all. And thank you all for your comments and being here this evening. Anything under discussion items?
That from staff, Rios?
And anything matters from the board? Nada? Our next meeting is April the 9th, 2024, and I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Rita moves to adjourn.
Beachside seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather, Member Mather, Member Mather,
We'll take that as okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Aguilar
Sorry, guys.
Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.